What's everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had enough of Team 7 Harem? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. I promise on my word that the next time we see each other I will be stronger. Strong enough to protect you girls no matter what comes my way. I said to the girls at the side of my hospital bed. You mean that Digazaru Tilda? The tallest of the three said. The smallest of the three stared at me, but I knew she said the same thing by the look in her eyes. Yea, I mean it, and my word is my bond. I never go back on my word, never, so just you three watch. When you see me I'll be stronger than anyone here in the village, I said, self-assured even though my body was still hurting. Then, let's make a promise, the second tallest said, making me turn to her in confusion. What kind of promise? I asked. The same girl said with her pinky raised towards me, with the other two copying after her. When we come back next time you'll be stronger then and be our husband. Stunned, I just shook it off and raised my pinky towards theirs, wrapping ours together, and said, it's a promise. It's a promise. It's a promise, did Tilda Gazaru. It's a promise. End dream. It's a promise, the young man said with his hand raised. As he got up he looked into his hand and thought, I haven't thought of that day since a couple years back. It couldn't be, could it? This young man is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha, but many know of the young shinobi in as the demon brat, and the dobi, to name off a few. Many may see him as a dobi, but that's to those who don't see Naruto for who he is or attempt to know him. He's quite smart, more so than a Nara, and stronger than the Sannin in their prime, since he started training when before he joined the academy. He was trained by many of the best ninja in the village it's got to offer, but refused to show 90% of his skill due to a few key things. 1. Nobody takes the dobi seriously, giving him the advantage. And 2. Growing up, if the civilians got wind of him growing stronger, they would demand he give his skills to his asshat of a teammate, Sasuke Uchiha, the sole survivor of the Uchiha clan. Especially with his bastard sensei, Kakashi Hitaki, son of Sakumo Hitaki the White Fang, with their Sharingan eye, and sole survivor of the old Team 7 that was led by his father Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Then there's the team's biggest embarrassment of Kunoichi history, Sakura Haruno, daughter of Sakiri Haruno, the civilian council head. The only reason the girl became a shinobi in the first place is because her mom has control of the actions in the academy and watered it down to where it was 80% history and math, 20% shinobi training. She has 10% skill and 90% intellect when she doesn't have Sasuke on the brain. Sigh, another sunrise and another day of doing jack shit on my team, if it can be called that. He thought, getting dressed, putting on his true clothes on and activating his illusionary seals, making him appear as a short spiky-headed sun-kissed blonde wearing a kill me now neon orange jumpsuit. He's known about his parentage since he was 3. He knows his godfather is Jiraiya of the Sannin alongside his grandmother Tsunade, who was told he died when he was born, making him make a mental note to ask for permission to search for her. But back to the sniveling toad. He has a strong dislike for the man due to him never visiting the boy due to some moronic prophecy, while having the nerve to spend the money his father and mother left him at brothels and bars. Well, that was nipped in the bud by his surrogate grandfather Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage. He found out of his spending of the Uzumaki Namikaze clan funds. Sarutobi has told Naruto of his parentage then and there and helped him train with the aid of a few people he trusts dearly, including a few clan heads and his trusted Anbu. If he were to face a multiple S-class ninja, he could win with zero doubt, even against Madara, who will most likely come after him for the Kyuubi which was absorbed into him. As per the story, Kyuubi told him the day he was absorbed he intends to get revenge for the death of his parents. At Team 7's training ground, walking through the doors of his family's compound, locking the door behind him with the security and break-in prevention seals, and activated the Hiraishin seal on the door, putting him in front of his fake apartment, walking to Team 7's training ground to see the usual routine duck asses brooding under a tree while his biggest fan is fawning over him. Sakura sees him and stomps up to him, shouting at him, Naruto baka, you're late. Why did you keep me and Sasuke-kun waiting? Dobi. About to hit him, Naruto thought, his hair overshadowing his eyes, I've had enough. Catching her hand in his, he said in a quiet tone, Sakura, the next time you try to hit me you're going to lose the use of that hand. And I can't be late if Kakashi-sensei isn't even here. Tightening his grip, he says, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to sit down over by the duck ass. And shut The fuck up. She nods fearfully, having her hand removed from his grasp, and whimpers her way over to her object of affection, forgetting the events that had just occurred. While Sasuke was watching the events transpire but continued to pay no mind towards them, thinking, "One day I will kill you, brother." So there they were, doing part 2 of their endless routine, the three of them sitting at their training ground doing what they do, with Naruto reading a scroll on Fuinjutsu, while his two associates wait for the lazy-ass Kakashi to show up 4 hours late. Once he showed up in his standard pose, porn in his left hand burying his nose, right hand in his pocket with his face mask and headband covering his Sharingan eye. He looked towards his two team, aka Sasuke plus 2 stepping stones, and says, "Yo, my cute little genin, let's head to the Hokage mansion for a mission." Sasuke grunts, shrugging Sakura off of him, and Naruto hops from his perch on a tree, waiting for them to leave them behind, using his variation of the Hiraishin called Shunpo to get outside the door, waiting another half hour. At the Hokage mansion, when they got there, Sakura shouted, "Dobi, how did you get here before us?" He just ignored her and waked into the building, saying his hello to the secretary with a smile. "Why hello Amaya-chan, how are you doing today?" Greeting her young friend, she said, "I'm doing quite well today, Naruto-kun, and thanks for those baked goods yesterday, my boyfriend loved them." He smiled, giving her a hug, and said, "Well, tell him if you or him ever want something made, just ask and I'd be more than happy to." She giggled and said, "Sandame-sama is expecting you and your team, Naruto-kun, go on ahead." He nodded and left without paying attention to his team, walking up the long stairwell towards the room overlooking the village. Knocking on the door, he heard a faint "enter." Waking in, he was greeted by the sight of his surrogate grandfather Sarutobi Hiruzen, who said, "Ah, Naruto-kun, it's a pleasure to see you today, where's your team?" He greeted with a cheery, "Hey Gigi, it's good to see you today. And my team is on their way." Catching the venom in his voice, which made everyone cringe, he made a note to talk to him when the rest of Team 7 walked in, as Sakura was heaving while Sasuke was brooding and Kakashi still had his nose in his book. Kakashi said, "Team 7 here for an assignment, Hokage-sama." He nodded and said, "Well, we have quite the selection of missions for you all today. You can clean the Inuzuka kennels, paint the elder's fence, help an old lad." He was cut off when Sasuke demanded, "I demand a higher ranked mission. How am I supposed to show my superiority to these losers if I'm stuck doing chores for a bunch of ingrates, you decrepit old crone?" he said in a huff, till the room was blasted with a high dose of ki, coming not from the Hokage but from Naruto, making everyone except the Anbu hiding in the room who were about to put the brat down and the Hokage on their knees. He said, "Uchiha, you better watch your tone to your superiors. Such an act is considered treason and will result in your death. Be lucky acted first instead of the Anbu in this room, or your head would be rolling on the floor before your fangirl could scream Sharingan." Before Kakashi could reprimand Naruto, Hiruzen said, "Thank you, Naruto-kun, you should be sure to teach the Uchiha respect, Kakashi, but since I'm in a giving mood." He was interrupted as Team 8 walked in, making Naruto turn to them and greet them, saying, "Hello Kurenai-sensei, Hinata-chan, Shino, Kiba." They all greeted him in some way while Kiba just snorted, still leering at Hinata and Kurenai, making him shoot Kiba with a sharp blast of ki, causing him to freeze up, much to their delight. Kurenai nodded in Naruto's direction and said, "Team 8 requesting an assignment, Hokage-sama." He nodded and said, "Well, this is perfect. I was about to grant Team 7 this mission, but they could always use the assistance." They nodded as he said into the intercom, "Amaya-chan, could you send in the client waiting in the hallway?" "Right away, Hokage-sama," she said, giving a buzz through the intercom when someone was a few feet from the door, the smell of booze making Naruto cover his nose, thinking, Sometimes I hate my enhanced sense of smell." The client walked in and said, looking around the room, "This is my hired protection 6 brats. One smells like he hasn't bathed in months. The other looks like she's afraid of her own shadow. One appears to be blind. One looks emo, another looks like she's got no skill, and the blonde looks to at least appear to be serious about his job. But the red-eyed beauty I wouldn't mind being around." He was about to take another swig of his sake when the neck of the bottle shattered, making the bottom fall to the ground, shattering to pieces. Everyone looked to the wall to see a kunai in the wall, making them follow their trajectory to see Naruto's hand outstretched, showing he was the one who threw it. Naruto said in a no-nonsense tone, "Sir, you should know that we are trained shinobi. And while I may not care for the mutt and the two next to me, I refuse to let you talk like that to Kurenai, Hinata and Shino. We are trained to handle any situation. He nodded fearfully, looking on as Naruto caught Sakura's fist and said while still looking at their client, Sakura. Didn't I warn you not to try that again? I've been lenient about that, but now you do it in front of your leader, which you should know an assault on a fellow leaf shinobi will result in remove of shinobi status and sealing of your chakra network, or death if you persist. You got several strikes against yourself, don't push your luck. Again she was shaking like a leaf while Kurenai shook her head at the excuse of a kunoichi. Kakashi, not wanting to be here anymore, said, "Alright team, meet at the gate in an hour with your supplies packed for about a month." Disappearing in a shunshin, the client left along with Shino and Kiba, leaving Kurenai and Hinata with Naruto and the Hokage in the room, making Naruto say, "You noticed it too, didn't you, Sarutobi-sama?" He nodded and said, "Elite Genin Hinata Yuhi, Naruto Namikaze and Kurenai Yuhi." They saluted, noticing the change in Hinata. She carried herself with authority and confidence and had an expression that said, "Don't fuck with me," like a certain snake mistress. He began to write out a scroll and said, "Naruto Namikaze and Hinata Yuhi, you two have made a lot of progress since your training several years ago. In this scroll or as a notice, should Kakashi not be able to properly lead, you two are to be placed as leaders of this mission." They saluted and were about to leave when he said, "Naruto-kun." Turning around he said, "Yes, Sarutobi Gigi?" Smiling he said, "Is something wrong with your team?" That got the attention of the two girls before him as he said, "Yes, Sandame-sama. Kakashi Hitaki Junin of the village has shown zero ability to act as a Junin. He's had us do nothing but teamwork exercises while secretly training Sasuke, leaving Sakura and I to our own devices. We haven't even done a single chakra control exercise since the forming, not that I need it. Sakura shows zero ability as a kunoichi while stuck in the mindset that her prince in shining armor will always save her." Breathing in he continued, "Sasuke continues to show signs of being a flight risk. He shows zero respect to his superior and appears to have zero care for his teammates. And in all actuality, I was going to ask if you let me switch teams if someone on another team wants to switch a member of their team or disassemble the team altogether, because this team is bound to be, no offense Sarutobi-sama, the repeat of the Sannin, except Sakura will die on a serious mission should someone not watch her." Hiruzen knew that was a low blow due to the fact that he did what Kakashi was doing now, show attention to one student over the other. One fawns over him, and the other, well. Naruto can't be compared to Jiraiya. Now he could see the perfect team in Naruto, Hinata and Shino. Naruto the all-around specialist, Hinata the taijutsu, medical ninjutsu specialist, and Shino, should he branch out, the kenjutsu specialist, fuinjutsu and genjutsu specialist. He turned to Kurenai and could see she was coming to the same conclusion when he said, "Naruto, Hinata, leave Kurenai and I to ourselves for a moment. She will be waiting for you outside the gate, and remember this scroll if Kakashi shows he isn't capable." "At your leave, Hokage-sama." They saluted and shunshined to their homes and prepared, leaving Kurenai and the aged Kage to their devices. With Naruto and Hinata. "Naruto Koi, what do you think Sarutobi-sama wanted to talk to Kurenai-ne-chan about?" she said, sauntering next to him on their way into their home at the compound, moving in with Naruto after she was exiled. Wrapping his arm around her waist, kissing her neck, making her moan, saying, "Who knows, but I know I can't stand being without you like this. And I miss Enko-chan, when is she getting back?" Faking sincerity she said, Is Naru-kun missing hubbyheim?" He mock sniffed, saying, "Yay." Turning in his arms she kissed him on the lips, saying, "Well, don't you worry, she will be back by the time we return to the village." He smiled at her and said, "Tenchi-chan, you always know what to say to cheer me up." She just smiled as they got to their room and got their stuff packed in storage scrolls when Naruto spotted the small picture of him, Hinata and the three girls from the dream. She turned to Naruto, who was looking at the picture, and said, "I miss them too, Naruto-kun." He turned to her and said, "I've tried writing to them but they just stopped after our 3rd year in the academy." "You think something happened to them?" Shaking their head she said, "No. I know they're very capable. Even though we were kids, they're capable of defending themselves, I know it." He nodded and said, "Alright, also how is your team, Hinata-chan?" Showing signs of irritation she said, "I had to deal with a pathetic horn dog. Shino is fine, but Kiba is getting on my last nerve. I am this close to giving him the first Jukin-styled change without anesthetic." Laughing, he placing his scrolls on in his pockets, he said, "Now you know how I feel. Kakashi may think I don't notice, but I feel the ki he shoots at me. Sasuke is an insufferable prick and Sakura well. You know Anko would have either beaten the fangirl out of her or killed her should she have given up trying to change her." She nodded and grabbed onto him once the doors were locked and shunpoed a bit away from the gate where they've seen Sasuke brooding and Sakura still fawning over him. Kiba was doing who knows what and Tazuna came back smelling better than before with Kurenai talking to him. Hinata had let go of him much to their displeasure as Hinata took her meek persona again as they were greeted with Sakura screeching about being late and Kiba yelling, "Dobi, get away from Hinata-chan. She doesn't want to be around a loser like you." He just sent a sharp burst of ki towards him and growled, "Shut it, Mutt, you're annoying." Whimpering, he moved as far away from him as possible, making Naruto snort as he and Hinata sat under the tree next to Kurenai as he took his book out and began writing things down, gaining the attention of Sakura and Sasuke, who were about to speak when Kakashi said, "Yo, everyone got their things?" Looking at Naruto, he said, trying to make Naruto look stupid, "Naruto, where's your things? Forget them." He took his focus from his book and pulled out 7 scrolls and said, "Storage scrolls, sensei, easy storage." Not picking up the sarcasm, he snorted and said, "All right everyone, we're going in a diamond formation with Tazuna in the middle. Me and Kurenai in the front, with Sasuke and Kiba on right, Shino and Sakura to the right, and Naruto and Hinata bringing up the rear." Ignoring Sakura complaints about not being with her Sasuke-kun and being paired with the bug freak, making Shino flinch involuntarily, making him and Hinata shoot her with a burst of ki, and said, "Sakura, shut up. Your voice could alert a possible enemy to our location. And if you don't have anything nice, don't say anything at all." She shook and walked quietly, much to everyone's pleasure, when a soft sniffling coming from Shino making him ask Hinata quietly, "Hinata-chan, is Shino a girl?" She looked at him and said, "Obviously, don't tell me you didn't notice?" Frantically he said, "Of course I didn't notice. Her scent is a mix of insect food and morning dew, and when we were in the academy her scent was drowned out by everyone else's, hell, mainly Kiba's." Silently she said, "Don't worry Naruto-kun, we'll confront her when we get to the client's home. But did you see that puddle?" Looking out of the corner of his eye, he nodded and signed to Kurenai, who nodded, thinking, such a pathetic genjutsu. Once they all passed it, 2 shadows shot from it, wrapping Kurenai and Kakashi in a link of shuriken when one said, "2 down." They pulled, shredding, the 2 Chunin apart, leaving a bloody mess in their place, making Hinata and Kiba scream out for their Chunin, with Sasuke freezing in his place. Naruto said, "Hinata, protect Tazuna. Shino, can you handle the one on the left?" He nodded and said, "You can count on me, Naruto-san." Grinning, Naruto said, "Great, let's get wild." Naruto charged the one on the right at mid-Chunin speed and hit the tenketsu in the arm attached to the glove, making him grunt and say, "What the?" Before he could say anything else, Naruto started hitting him in his other arm and his legs, preventing him from moving. When he had seen the chain about to wrap around Shino, Naruto threw a kunai at the link, catching a hole and buried itself to the hilt in a tree, snagging the 2 of them, making Shino nod to him, getting a nod in return. Naruto said, "Kurenai-sensei, Kakashi, you can come out now." Sakura was about to say something when Kurenai said, "Good job, Naruto-kun. Hinata-chan, Shino-kun. She doesn't know he's a she." Smiling at her, he said, tossing a kunai at the other member of the duo's hand, who were about to remove the chain, making him cry out in pain, "No problem, sensei." Naruto, was it necessary to take such harsh actions? Kakashi said, mad that his prized student didn't act like he had hoped. "Don't you know who these 2 are, sensei? Gozu and Mizu, the demon brothers of the Mist 2 C-rank missing ninja from Kiri, and I am gonna get some answers from these 2. He said, grabbing the 2 of them, and dragged the 2 of them into the forest, where not 2 minutes in blood-chilling screams followed, then silence. After a moment, Naruto walked out of the forest alone, bloodied, and gave an unnerving smile that said he was satisfied, reminding the one-eyed Chunin of a snake mistress in the village. He confronted Naruto and said, "Naruto, was that necessary?" Frowning at the Chunin, he replied, "One Hitaki, you're already on notice. When 2 of your genin couldn't react, had me Hinata and Shino not acted, your precious Uchiha would be dead. So don't start seeing such deplorable inaction, shows you're not fit to lead on this mission, so here." He tossed Kakashi the scroll the Sandaime wrote, making him read it, going wide-eyed. He was about to tear it apart when Naruto said, "Disregard that scroll, will lead to being demoted to Chunin, so don't even Walking towards Tazuna, he said, "Now Tazuna-san, can you tell me why you had 2 missing ninja after you?" Seeing the look in Naruto's eyes made him cave and explain the situation of his village and how everyone pitched together to afford that single mission pay. Naruto nodded and walked towards Kurenai, Hinata and Shino and said, "So what do you 3 think we should do?" "I say that we carry on and send a message to Hokage-sama telling him about the situation in Wave and see if he can accept the C-rank mission for now, and when they are more financially stable they can send the pay for the A rank at another time," Kurenai said. "What about you 2? What do you say about this?" Naruto said, looking towards the 2 silent members. "It seems logical to carry on from what we heard. They seem to be in a serious predicament. Such an action will lead to the village's image to take a downward slide, making other villages think we're weak," Shino said. "I agree with Shino-kun on this one," Hinata said, getting a nod from everyone else as they walked towards the group. Naruto said, "Alright Tazuna, this is how we're going to do things. We'll continue this mission, and once we send a scroll to the Hokage telling him about the situation, we will see if he'd be willing to work things out, alright?" He nodded, crying, repeating "thank you" over and over when Kakashi cut in. "On whose authority, Genin? One pull that rank shit on me again, Kakashi. You will be the oldest Genin in existence. And 2, if you haven't read that scroll you will see that I find you horribly incompetent, which means here's the pecking order till the end of the mission. Me, Hinata, Kurenai, then Shino, then you, and that's one of the least like situations, so shut it Hitaki, you're already on notice for such an action," he said, his patience falling short. Tazuna asks, Kid, is that a bad thing?" Turning to their client he says, "Let's just say if a Chunin did that to their genin with 0 combat experience, they would be killed once they returned to the village or have someone else do it. While our cage is less severe, Kakashi would be lucky to keep his shinobi career." Grimacing, Naruto turned to Kurenai and said, "Did you write out the scroll?" She nodded, handing him the parchment. He rolls up one of his sleeves, revealing a tattoo in the form of a serpent coiling around his arm. He drew a bit of blood as he smeared the tattoo, and slamming his hand on the ground he said, "Summoning Jutsu." In a plum of smoke, a arm-length leviathan appeared with a wingspan as long as his leg. Turning to him it said in a feminine voice, "Greetings Naruto-sama." "Hello Shiva-chan, how's your mom?" he said. Smiling as best as a serpent could, she said, "Boss is great. She wish you'd summon her to fight sometime in the future, though. Need me to do something?" He nodded and held out the scroll and said, "I need you to give this to Hokage-sama. Once he reads this and writes a new scroll for you, I want you to get back to me, okay?" She nodded, wrapping her tail around the scroll and bowed, disappearing in a plum of smoke. Turning around he got a mixture of looks. Kakashi, Sasuke, Kiba and Sakura were curious and pissed, while Tazuna, Kurenai, Shino and Hinata were surprised and curious. Tazuna asked, Did that snake just talk?" He started to chuckle and said, "That's right, you're not from a shinobi village. Well, that was a summoning animal, and she was a leviathan, not a snake. Summoning animals are creatures that live in a dimension parallel to our own, and through the signing of a contract you can have their kind work alongside you." He nodded and said, "Are those the only kind?" Naruto shook his head and said, "For almost any animal that exists here there is the possibility that a summoning realm for their kind exist. To name a few are snakes, slugs, toads, dogs, birds of various species, insects of various kinds. Then there are head summoning clans. Those are the leaders of the other clans, like dragons, hydras, and leviathans work together to lead the snake and serpent summons. I don't know who leads the slugs. Many amphibious creatures lead the toads. Various wolf species lead the dogs. Phoenixes lead the various birds. Other more vicious insects lead them, and so on." Nodding with a notepad brought from who know where he said, "Can anyone summon animals, and is it possible to hold multiple contracts?" Nodding he said, "Good question. Well, to answer the first, if you have high enough reserves then yes, but without a focal point, i.e. the summoning contract, then they will be reversed summoned to that summons realm, and it's to the species you're most aligned to. And it is possible to hold multiple contracts, but the summons boss have to agree to it, or say you must sign the other's contract first to get the okay to use their summons." A puzzled look appeared on his face, making him walk towards Tazuna and said, "Could you take us to your home? I'll explain whatever you got to ask on the way." He nodded, leading them to the ferry. 20 minutes later. So there are cases where a branch of the summons, like these snake summons, don't follow the laws of their leaders and are excommunicated from that contract and are left to themselves? Tazuna said quietly as that rowed across the water, quietly getting a nod in approval. That's right, and for some of the exiled clan's summons they are given the chance to lead the newly rebuilt contract as the new leader for that clan, Naruto said just as quiet. But what about if anyone can get a contract, he said. Well will you shut up Dobi, nobody wants to hear you anymore. He was cut off by Sakura's screeching. Pulling a seal out of his pocket he slapped it over her mouth and hissed out, shut up. Anyway, like as I was saying, it is possible to get a contract by either finding their contract by chance, family heirloom, or through the other two ways, summoning or finding the contract while you're outside. It is one of those rare occurrences. Last thing, you mentioned having high reserves earlier when it comes to this reverse summoning deal. Why is that? Tazuna said with even the ferryman was drawn in. The reason you have to have high reserves is because for the summoning without a contract, the summons that you're aligned to will pull you in through the chakra you used to summon them into their realm. This will cause your reserves to be drained at a serious rate till you get there. If your reserves are low, then you're as good as dead, Naruto said simply. Before Tazuna could ask anything else, the boat hit the end of the lake, making Naruto say, Shino, I need you to send some of your Kakaichu. That right? And see if they spot any ninja hiding, and Hinata, I need you to use your Byakugan to see if you see anyone or anything coming our way, alright? They nodded and got out of the boat with Naruto in the front, ignoring Tazuna, giving their thanks to the man's help on crossing. When the fog got thicker, it seems too dense to be normal, and it's too late in the day for it to be this heavy. Got to be on our toes. He looked out of the corner of his left eye to see Hinata, Shino and Kurenai come to the same conclusion when a rustling come from the bush to his right. Out of reflex he tossed a kunai into the bush, noticing whoever was there replaced themselves with something, making him check in that person's place was a snow-white rabbit, making Kiba say, good going Dobi, you sensed a bunny, ha ha ha. Planting a hand over Kiba's mouth he heard a buzzing sound, making him shout, hit the deck. Grabbing Tazuna and Sasuke and pushed them down while jumping over a large spinning blade, making him groan, thinking, it had to be this guy, just perfect. First my team, then Hitaki's attitude, now this Kami loves to fuck with my life. If it's Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist, gotta say I'm gonna have work from frustration. Thanks from my team. Thanks for offering, Naruto said. Atop a sword that was as long as he was tall was a man, wore black Anbu-styled shinobi pants with cow print arm and leg warmers and with black shinobi sandals. He wore a black sleeveless muscle shirt and had medical bandages acting as a face mask, with his kiri headband at the top right side of his head, with his hair following in the same direction. He turned his attention to the one who spoke and noticed 4 of the 6 before, though 2 of them struck him harder. He shook and said, T, the Ryuketsu no Kitsune of the Leaf Village and the Daiden Shi of the Leaf Village. Naruto turned towards Hinata and said, well, Hinata-chan, it seems our reputation precedes us. Indeed it is, Naru-kun, but what should we do with such a welcome he's given us? Hinata said, surprising everyone other than Kurenai and Shino. Wrapping his arm around her he said, why, what we do all the time, kick some ass, but first. Zabuza, why are you here? For the bridge builder Gato wants this man's head on a platter and I'm gonna get paid for it, he said. Naruto turned towards Tazuna and said, stay next to Hinaheim, Shino and Kurenai-sensei. And Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke and Mud, get over here in a box, make sure he's safe. When they didn't move he flooded the air with killer intent and said, do as I said, now that's an order. Scared stiff they jumped into the formation and stayed there with Sakura, Sasuke and Kiba shaking like a leaf. Naruto pulled out a couple scrolls, unsealing them, and out came an O-katana, Yamato, and a long katana with a serrated edge, Tensa Zangetsu, from his second Bankai. Play Blinded by Light Final Fantasy Shi battle theme. Attaching Yamato to his hip by the string he drew Tensa Zangetsu and said with a disturbed fox-like grin, ever see the anime freezing the chick with the closed eyes and the constant grin? Yay, that one. They haven't had the pleasure of tasting blood in so long, I hope for your sake she's satisfied with yours. Before he could react he made a dash for him at speeds not even Kakashi could see, with his Sharingan knocking Zabuza into the lake at the edge of land. With a grunt Zabuza pushed Naruto back and said, damn, if I knew I had to deal with you two I'd have left the old man alone. Hee hee, ah, what's wrong Zabu, don't want to fight? Feigning sympathy and dashed at him with his sword cloaked in blackish red fire and swung it, shouting out, Enten, Kuroi Getsuga. A wave of blackish red fire came flying from the sword in a crescent moon arc at Zabuza. Forming a long line of seals he shouted, Sweden, Saryuden no Jutsu. A large water dragon came flying from the lake he stood atop of and crashed into it only for it to evaporate into steam, shocking everyone. Naruto said, "Sorry, but that isn't any ordinary fire, Zabuza. That's the blaze release, a stronger form of it said to be made from the flames of Amaterasu herself in her rage against her brother." Appearing behind him in a burst of speed, he said, "And this will be the end." Going for a downward slash only for him to deflect several senbon and a kick to the side of his head which he blocked with his forearm. Before he could react, Zabuza was grabbed by a masked shinobi and vanished. End song. Ah, that was too short. He shouted in distaste only to be patted on the head by Hinata, who comforted him saying, There Naruto-kun, he may have gotten away but you can fight him again, alright." Nodding, he said, "Yay, I guess. Oh well. Hey Tazuna, your place isn't that far from here, is it?" Getting a shake of the head, he shouted back, "No, at the most it should only take 15 minutes to half an hour to get there. Come on, I'll lead the way." Bowing like a gentleman, he said, "Lead the way." Tazuna nodded and said, walking ahead of everyone, "Come on, it's not too far from here. You can rest there." Everyone followed ahead with nobody noticing the three figures in the shadows of the trees fade into the background. Tazuna's home 15 minutes later. "I got to admit, Tazuna, your place is pretty nice. Far from the city and quiet, giving a sense of calm. I could live like this no problem," Naruto said, taking a view of the home and its surroundings, getting a nod from Kurenai, Hinata and Shino, who were agreeing with him. Smiling in appreciation, he said, "Thanks kid, I built and maintained her with these two hands since when my daughter was 3 years old." Smiling at his dedication, Naruto said, "Well, your pride in your work shows, if that bridge is any indication." Taking it all in stride, he walks towards the door only for it to open and get greeted to a blow to the face with a frying pan, making everyone stand on edge. Out from the house came a young woman, possibly in her late 20s, early 30s. She had long navy blue hair with her bangs framing her heart-shaped face, wearing a pink and rose-red shirt and a long black skirt that went to her ankles. She had a look that screamed pissed, and boy was she. She said, "Damn it dad, you had me worried. What took you so long?" as she brought out another frying pan, making Naruto hide behind Hinata, who said subtly, "Reminds you of Yoshino-san, doesn't she?" Naruto could only nod, seeing the frustration on her face reminded him of when Shika's mom was pissed with her being lazy and not wanting to do anything. While she was ranting, they noticed her brandish a knife, with Naruto deciding he got tired of seeing the client beaten senseless by his own daughter. He walked up and said, "Excuse me ma'am, sorry to interrupt this amusing display, but the reason he was late was because we ran into some trouble along the way. We are the help he hired to protect him and your family from any of this Gato's forces. I do apologize for us making you worry about your father." Now noticing the group around her, she blushed in embarrassment. She bowed and said, "There's no need to apologize for my father. He can be a bit useless sometimes. I'm Tsunami, his daughter, and thank you for making sure he got her safely. I hope he didn't pull the guilt trip card on you all, did he?" Cutting her eyes at her father, who tried to make himself seem as small as possible. Chuckling, he said, "No, not at all, but where are our manners? You introduced yourself, but we haven't. Do you mind letting us in and we can begin?" Leading the group in, he whistled and said, "I was right, this has that homey feel to it, nice." Taking a seat on the couch with Hinata leaning her head on his lap, making him chuckle as he brushed his hand through her hair. He said, once everyone was comfortable, "Now that you were kind enough to invite us into your home, I will begin the introductions. My name is Uzumaki Naruto Genin of Konoha." Hinata said from her position on the couch, said, "I am Yuhi Hinata, adoptive daughter of Yuhi Kurenai, who is the Chunin of Squad 8, with me being a Genin of Konoha and member of Squad 8. Shino said, sitting in a chair next to Naruto, nodding, his Shino Aburame clan, heir to the Aburame clan and Genin of Konoha, second member of Squad 8. Kiba said at the table with Akamaru, names Kiba Inuzuka, and this is Akamaru clan, heir of the Inuzuka clan and last Genin of Squad 8, the alpha male. Hinata snorted, getting everyone's attention, but Naruto ignored it and continued to brush a hand through her hair. Sasuke grunted and said, "Uchiha Sasuke," getting Sakura to swoon, making Naruto say, "And the walking bubblegum hair accident is Sakura Haruno, second member of Team 7, with me being the last of this lovely team. And our Chunin is the one-eyed scarecrow Kakashi Hatake." She nodded and said, "Would any of you like some tea?" Naruto, Hinata, Shino and Kurenai nodded, while Kakashi, Kiba, Sakura, and Sasuke didn't pay her any mind, getting a negative look from everyone else, more so the girls in the room due to Kakashi's book. He was so into the trashy novel he didn't notice a kunai fly into it and pierce the book and connect to the wall, making him yelp and look to see Naruto had thrown it, and he did not seem pleased though the girls did. Naruto, with an authoritative tone, he said, "Hitaki, you're already on notice with this situation going on record as well. So I'm going to save the old man a problem and say if I see that or any of those trashy sorry excuses for literature out while we're on this mission, you can say goodbye to those books and the use of your uncovered eye, understood?" He didn't give a reply, getting a kunai close to the hand reaching for the book, and said, "I don't think you heard me, so I will repeat myself. Do you understand?" He nodded, about to disregard his warning, only for the pouch to wind up missing, containing his books and the one on the wall, and see them being burned outside, making him about to strike the blonde when he was flipped on his back and saw Naruto stand over him with a foot pressed hard on his chest, cutting off circulation to his breathing, seeing the cold, lifeless look in those sapphire blue eyes. Naruto got in close and said, "That's strike 2, Kakashi. One more, you can resign yourself to your fate when we return to Sandaime-sama." Getting a muffled shout, he turned to see Sakura shout, or at least attempt to, with that seal over her mouth, which made everyone wonder, is that what silence is like? Walking up to the fuming blonde, he said patiently as he waited for her to calm down, "Do you promise not to yell unless as a warning through this mission, or bring up Sasuke-kun?" She looked like he ripped out her heart, but nodded reluctantly to everyone's pleasure, ripping off the tag, making her yelp in pain, and said after the fact on his way back to the small home, "Oops, I meant to warn you to brace yourself, it was going to hurt." She growled but huffed, knowing he was gonna put that tag back on her mouth if she yelled, so decided against it, much to everyone's delight. Going back in the home, he was welcomed by a puff of smoke in the form of Shiva, and said, "Did he return the message, Shiva-chan?" Nodding, loosing the coil from around the small scroll, she handed it to him with her tail still out, making him remember, "Oh right, your reward, how could I forget?" Going in his back was a medium-sized scroll. When he unfurled it and come to see several seals across from one another from the left to right, unsealing one, and out came a small bag of candy, making her squeal in delight. He held it out of her reach and said, "Be sure to share it with your sister, all right, and tell Ma I said when there is a serious opponent she'll be the first I call for." She nodded, rapidly grabbing the candy in a puff of smoke, gone in an instant, making him chuckle, saying, "She possibly didn't even hear me when I gave her the candy. Gotta remember to give reward after I say my piece." Sitting back down, feeling the glare aimed at him, he said to Sasuke, "What do you want, Uchiha?" Holding out his hand, Naruto looked at it. After slapping it, he said, "There, I gave you 5, now go away." Glaring harder, he said, "No Dobi, I demand you hand over your summons and weapons. Things like those can only be used by the elite." Settling into a dark look that made Sasuke back off, he said, "When you forget yourself on this mission, this is going on the report. Should you continue these action through the mission, you will be lucky enough to pick up your shinobi career in time for the Chunin exams this year." Kurenai said, "Oh yeah, that is this year, isn't it?" Getting a nod and some confused looks, she explained, "The Chunin exams is where a group of genin teams from each of the villages go to one of the shinobi villages to take a series of tests and get the chance to be promoted to Chunin, the second rank in the military before Junin." Tsunade and Tazuna nodded while Kiba scoffed and said, "So how does the Dobi know that?" "When I was little, I remember seeing a large number of ninja coming from different villages to the Leaf for a couple months. When I asked the Hokage-sama, he said that it was that they were coming for the Chunin exams. He said simply already tired of being around them. And we're going to be here for a month." "Kami, you bitch," Naruto thought in despair when he noticed Sasuke was making a reach for his swords. Grabbing Yamato, he gave him a blow to the stomach, making him crumble to the floor in pain, saying, "Strike 2, Sasuke, don't go for a third." Hinata, still in their original position, tapped Naruto on his stomach, making him look down at her to see she was pointing at Kiba, who was standing over them. He said with his patience close to hitting the breaking point, "What? Kiba, why the hell is the Dobi in charge of this mission when an alpha should be like me?" he said boisterously. "The reason this Dobi is in charge is because Sandaime-sama made the decision. If you have a problem with his decisions when we return, you can question the alpha that lets your clan stay in the village." Then explained to Sume-sama why they were forced to leave, because one of their clansmen questioned the commands of their village leader, he said, not appreciating the attitude. That made him back up but growl, saying, "Still doesn't explain why my Hinata-chan is with trash like you." Hinata was the one to speak up and said, "When I've always been with Naru-kun since before we were in the academy. We didn't announce it to the world because one who would take the meek wallflower and the boisterously loud Dobi serious in combat." And since when was I ever yours? You're my bitch, of course you're mine since I made my claim in the academy. You could hear a pin drop, even the nature outside went deathly quiet. Naruto said quietly, 1. Kiba, women aren't objects that you can claim, and 2. You'd better watch yourself here on, because 1. You're surrounded by 4 women. And 2. You already have 2 strikes. The first is for questioning someone, authority, and the second is for that comment. Tsunade, a woman who kindly let us into her home, has every right to tell us to grab our shit and sleep outside if she wishes, but is being nice enough to sleep here for the remainder of the mission. He scoffed and said, I don't gotta watch what I say because it's true. Women are only good for getting their rocks off and to cook, that's it. Other than that they have no worth in the world. Before he could say anything else, he was slapped across the face by Tsunade, who had a murderous look in her eyes and said, since you think such, you can sleep outside for the time you're here. He was about to complain about these arrangements when Naruto cut him off and said, Strike 3, and that's what happens when you don't listen, and I am sure Hokage-sama and Sume-sama and Hana-san would love to hear what their ninja, son, brother had to say about women who are also family and kunoichi of the village. He shook like a leaf in the wind, making Naruto snort, saying, It's your own fault, fool. Didn't take a hint to what I said, so hope you packed a sleeping bag or a tent, because till she says otherwise you're outside. Looking towards Hinata for help only to get nothing, he turned to Shino and said, Come on Shino, help me out here, man. Shino said simply, You brought this upon yourself, now you must learn to keep your comments to yourself. In a final attempt to make himself seem in a better light, his strongest, he swung at Naruto only to get a kick to the stomach, causing him to fall. The last thing he heard before passing out was, And assault on a fellow leaf shinobi are added to your charges. Same for Hitaki and Uchiha, you guys just make this easier, don't you? He said to Kurenai, who was nodded while thinking, Naruto was sugar-coating the truth about his team, wasn't he? He yawned when Tsunade said, Dinner will be ready in a moment, so wash up, but he can get his own food. Naruto chuckled at the unconscious Inuzuka heir and wrote a small note saying, When you wake up, get some fish from the lake or hunt for something. Love, Naruto. P.S. Let this be a lesson to you: while you sleep outside, women have more power than men any day. He gets up and says, I'm going to do a perimeter check before I eat, make sure Gato doesn't have any thugs or spies lurking around here to attack. Walking towards the door with his swords on his person, he says, Hinata-chan, if I'm not back in an half hour to an hour, come get me, alright? She nods saying, Alright Naru-kun. In the forest outside Tazuna's home, Naruto POV. I had to get some space from my team. I would love nothing more to get away from those 3 hypocrites, I said. Spending 15 minutes out here in the forest with my shadow clones scanning the perimeter does take a load off my stress nothing could possibly. I tensed. One of my clones were forcefully dispelled. Someone, those 3 caught onto me. Before I could react, a series of loud bangs and several daggers and kunai came flying from the forest, making me dodge. I thought, whoever these 3 are, they're good. Pulling out Yamato, I said, Who are you 3? Do you work for Gato? The smallest pulled out a large scythe with a solid black ivory handle. The blade was blood red. Imagine the scythe Rukia used in Fade to Black, except its handle was black instead of white. The second cloaked figure pulled out a weird L-shaped metal object. To his knowledge, it was a heavily modified Smith & Wesson Model 5 double-action revolver with blue roses designed onto it. The third girl brought out a long katana that was as long as her, Masamune if you want a description. Sighing, I said, Just my luck. When I started to relax, I run into conflict. Kami, my life sucks. First I have a memory of a promise I made, then a long-term mission with 4 people I don't like. Now a fight with 3 mysterious strangers. What's next? A group of S-rank missing ninja are coming after me. If I had listened close enough, I would have heard several people sneeze. Exhausted with the day, I thought, can I ever get a break? You 3 wouldn't happen to be willing to talk this out, will ya? Something grazed my cheek, making me touch it to see blood, muttering, Of course not, that would be too easy. Play Dreaming by Dead by April. Removing Yamato from its sheath, the tallest with the sword came charging at me. When she said, the figure said in a distorted voice, Remove the seal. Pushing me back, I countered with a downward swing and said, How do you know about that? But I'd prefer if we just fought. I go back to my client's home and eat whatever she's making and go to sleep after this long annoying day. The girl with the revolver blocked me with the muzzle, kicking me back. Flipping over the kick, forming hand signs, quickly I shouted, Wind style, devastating wind scythe. Swinging Yamato, a giant shredding windstorm came flying towards them, only for the short figure to cut through it with the scythe, making me think, why does all this seem familiar? Flashback in the fight. Come now Naruto-kun, gotta do better than that. The second girl tallest figure said, trying to go for a kick to my stomach. Flipping over it, I quickly formed several hand signs shouting, "Wind style, devastating wind scythe jutsu." The shortest girl cut through it saying, "You can do better Naruto-kun." Dodging the barrage of bullets, I went on the offensive and kicking the shorter girl's feet from under her, I said, "Earth style, planetary rock bind jutsu," trapping the small girl in a grip of rock forming up to her neck. Thinking, alright, one down, two to go. Hearing the sound of a twig snap, I rolled forward to avoid a horizontal swipe and countered saying, "I ain't going down that easily." Painting a seal on my hand, I charged forward, slapping the tallest girl on the stomach, paralyzing her in her a heap. Looking around, I said, "Where'd she go?" Fire style, Phoenix fireball jutsu. Rang through the forest when several small adult-sized fireballs came flying through the forest. Frantically I formed several hand signs saying, "Water style, Grand Leviathan wake." A large water serpent formed from the water around me and charged in the direction the fire was coming from, uprooting several trees in its wake. Kneeling, I sent a pulse of chakra to the ground and thought, "Gotcha," forming 3 shadow clones. They followed after her, taking her focus off of me, letting me place a chakra siphoning seal and paralysis seal on her, and said, "Regular fight. Stop song. Got ya now, who are you 3 and what are you doing here?" I growled, inching a kunai against its neck when my vision was distorted due to a flash bomb. "Goo again, Kami loves to fuck with me." Rubbing my eyes, I looked around to see the 3 assailants were gone. Making my way back to Tazuna's home, I heard a familiar tick ring through the air, making me freeze in my steps. "We'll be seeing you soon, Naruto-kun de Gazaru tilde." Looking behind me, thinking, it couldn't be, they vanished years ago after they left. I could tell things were going to be interesting by the end of the year. "Naruto-kun, I heard the sounds of a fight, are you okay?" Hinata said, arriving before I realized I was out for more than an hour. Grabbing my arm, she said, "Come on, Tsunami-san's waiting for us so she can serve dinner." With the figures. "So what did you think of Naruto-kun after so long?" the voice behind them said. "He kept his word, Anko-chan. He's grown stronger, but with so many restrictions like his 3 teammates, then we could have gotten the chance to test his real strength," the second tallest said. The other 2 nodded and Anko said, "Well, there is a way to test him if you're up to joining the village?" Piquing their interest, they nodded, making her grin, saying, "Excellent, well, let's not keep the old goat waiting." Hopping through the trees, the only thing they could focus on was that they could stop hiding and speak to him. "So what did you think of Naruto-kun after so long?" the voice behind them said. "He kept his word, Anko-chan. He's grown stronger, but with so many restrictions like his 3 teammates, then we could have gotten the chance to test his real strength," the second tallest said. The other 2 nodded and Anko said, "Well, there is a way to test him if you're up to joining the village?" Piquing their interest, they nodded, making her grin, saying, "Excellent, well, let's not keep the old goat waiting." Hopping through the trees, the only thing they could focus on was that they could stop hiding and speak to him. Since yesterday's events, he decided to drop the paper bomb on the group who didn't know that Zabuza was alive, and the grilling he got from Kakashi about the 3 mysterious assailants. Suffice to say, he got a bunch of heckling from the last 2 members of Team 7 in Kiba till Kurenai and Tsunami put them in their place, saying that at least he succeeded in protecting Tazuna while they stood on the sidelines watching. And him being able to fight off 3 trained shinobi who had better teamwork than a group of ninja who fought together for years. They didn't do much to improve their reviews either. Time and again Kakashi would focus on his porn over the mission. Kiba and Sakura would disregard Naruto and Hinata's commands. And Sasuke would spend the days demanding he hand over his weapons, including any and all techniques in his repertoire, to him because he was an elite. Including Kakashi tried altering the reports Naruto and Hinata were writing up since the beginning, only to get knocked out from traps they've set up like fake scrolls. To ensure that they're stronger for Zabuza and his accomplice, he decided to have them all train during the duration of the time in Wave. When someone finished training ahead of schedule, they'd ensure Tazuna had 2 people watching him and another 2 were watching Tsunami and her son Inari, whom they'd meet yesterday during dinner. That didn't necessarily go well since Kakashi hadn't taught them anything other than teamwork exercises and Sasuke several Kaiden jutsu, which Naruto nipped in the bud. He told Kakashi that he already has enough training to fight a low Chunin as his focus on Sakura, but that didn't work out since she can't get her head out of his ass. Same with Kiba, but with Hinata, so he gave them some motivation placing chakra binds on their arms. If they wanted to have those shackles removed, then they had to climb to the top of the tree to get the key using only their chakra and weren't allowed to use outside help, meaning no Orochimaru or Kakashi. The next day, thanks to Tsunade, Naruto was situated with Team 8 while Team 7 bunked in the room all the way down the hall. Team 8, being the early risers, were already outside doing a light workout consisting of push-ups, sit-ups, a mini taijutsu spar and chakra control exercises. Naruto sat up in a tree above Tazuna's home with his little book, writing more notes in them while looking up at the sun. He thought while writing in his book, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A mini explosion happened in the room Team 7 was situated in, making the residents rush out of the house, and said, gaining their attention over their coughing fit, "You're a half hour late. I said be up at 6. I'm not 6:30. Everyone, while in their PJs, looked up to see Naruto and the other members of Team 8 looking down at them as Kiba said, "Oh, get off it, Dobi, we're tired from training." A kunai flew past his cheek as Naruto said, "If a simple training regimen is too much for the pup, you're welcome to turn in your headband, and it's only been a day. There's plenty of training left to do." Growling while Orochimaru whimpered, hoping to get Kiba to shut up, he said, "Please, what other training can we do? I'm the strongest here and I've mastered the chakra control exercise, it's flawless." Everyone above him laughed as Naruto said, "When you aren't the strongest, 2 out of everyone here you have the worst chakra control. Even Sakura's control is better than yours, even if it's by the fact she has so little chakra to use, which is why if she got her head out of her ass and did more training, her reserves would increase and so would her control. Going for an attack," he said, "like hell you're stronger than me." Not even before he moved from his spot on the ground, Naruto vanished and appeared behind him, kicking his feet from under him and twisting him onto his back. Before he could get up, a foot came crashing down on his chest. Looking Naruto in the eye, he said, "As I said, you're not the strongest. Not of the genin in our graduating year, not in the Leaf, and most certainly not in the elemental nations. I suggest that you get over yourself and learn a bit of humility, because an ego like that leads to someone going rogue and breeding traitors to their village." Before he could remark more, pressure was added as Naruto continued, "And let me say this, I hear you try this shit again, you will be the first Inuzuka in the village to lose their shinobi status. Got me? Now all of you get dressed and come outside to start training. Since a certain Chunin was too incompetent to train his 2 genin properly, I've got someone's mistakes to fix." Not even giving them a second glance, he made his way back to the tree and sat atop the branch waiting, thinking, "It's going to be a long month. I might just end up killing the 3 of them. Wonder if there's a way to make it seem like an accident." He was broken from his thoughts when he heard a small voice said, "Hey Naruto." Looking down, he saw young Inari and hopped down from the tree in front of him, saying, "What's up Inari, something buggin' ya?" Looking down, he asked, "Why? Getting closer. Why are you all trying so hard? Gato's just gonna kill you all." The young boy screamed. "Like your father did?" he said. Seeing the surprised look on his face, he said, "I asked your mom when you and everyone went to sleep. He was your hero, someone you looked up to. He gave you and everyone in Wave the will to try and move. When Gato came, he was killed publicly, thus killing your will." Looking down, he felt a hand on his bucket hat and listened as Naruto continued, "But Inari, I have a few things to tell you. First and foremost, the only person who's going to die is Gato. 2, I won't give up. Your grandfather isn't making this bridge for his health, he's doing it so you and your mom can have a brighter future. If we give up, then everyone else you care for will die. I know you no longer believe in heroes, but for this last time, will you put your faith in me? I will show you and Wave that there are still heroes left in the world if you look hard enough." Before he could answer, Naruto walked away but said loud enough for him to hear, "I'll try." Not knowing Tsunade and Tazuna were listening, they thought with tears silently streaming down their face, "Thank you Naruto." In the forest, after waiting for a half hour for the last 3 slackers to get dressed, he said, "Since the 3 princesses decided to take their dear sweet time getting ready for the gala, training is going to be increased." The 3 late arrivals groaned, making Naruto bark out, "Hey! If you all didn't decide to take your sweet time, training would be over already, so don't complain. This will teach you to follow a higher-up's orders, got it?" Nodding, he said, "Good. Now Sasuke, Sakura, Kiba, I want the 3 of you to continue the tree walking exercise, but I'm increasing the difficulty. You're going to run up and down these trees while balancing a number of leaves on your body. Should one leaf fall, you have to start from the beginning." "What? How the hell are we going to do that?" Sakura screeched. "Same as when we were in the academy, Haruno. Naruto said, making her flinch since he no longer addressed her as Sakura-chan and mentally schemed to get him back around her finger and away from the bitch who's trying to steal her Sasuke away from her. When the three of them refused to move, he shouted, "Now!" Getting their shit in gear, they grabbed several leaves, applied chakra to their bodies to make them stick, and ran up the tree only to fall several times. With that continuing, he turned to Kakashi and said, "Kurenai-sensei, I need you and Hitaki to keep a watch on Tsunade and Inari. When these three finish, I'll send them your way to assist you all. Me, Hinata and Shino will go assist Tazuna at the bridge," he said, getting a nod from them and watched them walk through the trees. He made a reinforced shadow clone and said to it, "When the three of them complete the exorcise, send them to Kakashi and Kurenai. With the seal I put on him, it will keep him from focusing solely on Sasuke for training, which will be removed once we reach the gate of the village." It nodded and took his spot and said, "Alright, let's go help Tazuna." Nodding, the three of them dashed through the trees. At the incomplete bridge, a worker had just quit because of the risk of helping him complete the bridge had grown too high to risk his life. When Naruto said, "Fine, just quit, let your family suffer because you're afraid to risk your life to help improve everyone else's like the coward you are." The man didn't say anything, he just turned around and walked away. He turned to Tazuna and asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" Nodding, the old man said, "Yay, if you can make a couple dozen free workers appear to help speed up progress out of thin air, it would be appreciative." Smirking, he made a familiar cross-shaped hand sign and said, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." When the smoke cleared, dozens of clones just appeared from the smoke. As he turned to face Tazuna, he laughed at the expression he had. His eyes were bugged out with his jaw on the ground. Naruto finally managed to get out. "A couple dozen free workers just like you asked, just tell them where to go and what to do." Grabbing his hand, he shook it at speeds thought to be impossible and said, "Kid, you don't know what you just did for me. With this many I might just get ahead of schedule." Waving him off, he said, "No problem, if you need any more just let me know and I'll get to making them. I'll be over there with the others keeping an eye out for trouble." Making his way back, he reached Hinata, kissed her cheek and said quietly, "So see anything?" Shaking her head, she said, "No, nobody is within the area," and Shino-chan said that her bugs haven't picked anything up. He nodded and sat on a destroyed support beam from being made improperly with Hinata's head on his lap. She said, "So when are we going to confront Shino-chan about her gender?" "When you're ready is fine," he said absent-mindedly, his hand still running through her hair. Once Shino returned, Naruto asked, "You see anything while running around?" Getting a negative from her, Hinata said, "Guess that's another day we had nothing to worry over, huh?" They nodded as Naruto said, "From the looks of things we'll be able to return soon anyway. Looks like my clones finished a large portion of the bridge." They looked on as Tazuna returned from the end of the bridge and said, "Well, now that the bridge is almost finished, thanks to you, kid, let's get back." Agreeing, Naruto and the group made their way back with Tazuna from the use of a shunshin, leaving a whirlwind of leaves in their place. "How about after dinner?" He nodded, started combing his hand through her hair, making her sigh in content and enjoying the silence of it all. "Whenever you're ready, love," he said absent-mindedly as Shino returned. Naruto asked, "Find anything on your search?" She gave a negative, making Naruto say, "Well, at least we had nothing to worry about today, and by the looks of it my clones got more done in a day than he did before now." The three of them looked over at the bridge and was surprised with how far they've gotten in a day. He thought, shadow clones, the ultimate free work labor. Tazuna walked over to the bridge and said, "Kid, I gotta thank you, I've got more finished in a day than I had in a month at the least. Think you could make more of them during the rest of the month? I'd be willing to pay ya personally once the country is back on its feet." Nodding, he said, "Sure, I don't mind. You ready to go?" He stretched to the point you could hear the joints crack in his back and said, "Yeah, I just want to get home and eat. Wonder what Tsunade's got cooking today." Naruto put a hand on his back while Hinata and Shino put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Only one way to find out." Before he could ask what he meant, they vanished in a blackish-purple flash. Tazuna's home. They appeared outside the door, making Tazuna dry heave, making Naruto chuckle, saying, "Ye should have told you to brace yourself, the first time's always the bumpy one." Groaning as he reined in his stomach contents and said, "Ye make fun of the old man, kids these days, no respect, I swear." The three teens laughed. Shino gave a small one at his expense and walked in to see Tsunade with an expression that made Naruto ask, "What's wrong, Tsunade-san?" All she did was point at the 4 badly beaten ninja and a lounging Kurenai with the equally relaxed Akamaru sitting in her lap when he looked at Naruto and bound over to him hoping in his arms, making him ask Kurenai, what's going on? Sipping on her tea she said, the 4 fools here decided to bad-mouth you and attempted to take the scrolls. You had to alter the information when she caught them and confronted them. Kakashi tried laying his hands on her when she pulled out 2 knives and kicked their collective butts. Taking in that information he asked, Tazuna, Tsunade, did either of you ever have shinobi training? Tazuna shook his head while Tsunade nodded and said, yay, when I was little I was an elite Chunin of Kiri before the Civil War. While I was pregnant with Inari, not wanting him involved in the bloodshed, I moved out here in the outskirts and moved back in with Dad. I had a better track record than Kakashi when I was there. Everyone was shocked, making him ask, what was your track record? Pulling out a bingo book she said, go to page 621 inches. Tsunami, the twin Fang, Yuki. Rank. Low S rank. Affiliation. Kiri, last recorded 10 years ago. Once a member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist known to beat Kisame Hoshigaki, the Demon of Bloody Mist, and once was the Mizukage's most trusted Anbu guard Hyo, Panther. Once chosen for cage position of Kiri but passed it down not wanting to be tied down doing paperwork and sitting in place. Affinities. Sweden, Ration, Futon, Arashi, Storm, Hayaten, Ice. Kenjutsu. Once seen facing Orochimaru and one with little more than a couple of lacerations. Taijutsu. Low cage. Genjutsu. Low cage. Ninjutsu. Mid cage. Fuinjutsu. Unknown. Bounty. Kiri. 1, 0, 0 Ryo alive. Kumo. 50, 0, 0 Ryo alive or dead. Iwa. 25, 0, 0 Ryo alive or dead. Note. Known to carry twin Nodashi but fell off the face of the map with a ranking in the bingo book with a sulfur monosulfide rank. Appearance. Navy blue hair and a strong feminine build. Everyone looked between the woman in the photo and the woman and noticed a lot of similarities between them except for the face. In the photo without her mask she had her hair in a bun with a white cover over said bun held together with senbon needles. Her eyes were cold, piercing and calculative, the total opposite of the kind nature they've seen. The photo with the mask she looked the same but with clothing similar to that of that mysterious ninja the day they made it to Wave, but was predominantly black and gray instead of a forest green and ice blue. She laughed at everyone's expression and said, yes, I was and still am quite the ninja, though I quit when the Mizukage went on a power trip declaring anyone with a bloodline to be killed on sight. Though I am wondering what the Daiden Shi and the Ryaketsu no Kitsune of Konoha are doing here, and as children no less. Everyone looked at her like she was crazy until Shino, who said, now that I think of it, that Zabuza guy said something about those names while pointing at Naruto, Baka and Hinata. Naruto dropped the kind look on face and adopted a take no shit expression, go 2 pages before Tsunamis. Naruto, Ryaketsu no Kitsune, Uzumaki. Affiliation. Konoha no known actual rank about him but appears to be at least 15 known to wear an illusionary seal. Rank. Unofficial rank. Cage, official. Unknown. Status. SS rank. Affinities. Futon, Sweden, Enten. And known to use an unknown source similar to chakra. Any other affinities unknown. Kenjutsu. Hai Sanin, said use several weapons but only seen carrying a long katana and an o-katana. Taijutsu. Hai Sanin, knows several taijutsu styles. Ninjutsu. Hai Sanin, mastery over all known affinities including the use of an unknown ability. Genjutsu. Hai Sanin, capable of using genjutsu without hand seals up to S rank. Fuinjutsu. Hai Sanin, capable of painting the seals onto his or someone else's body. Bounty. Kiri. 50, 0, 0 Ryo alive 1, 0, 0 dead. Iwa. 2, 0, 0 Ryo dead 250, 0, 0 alive. Kumo. 150, 0, 0 dead 2, 0, 0 alive. Note. When traveling he is known to have an ally with the Daiden Shi of Konoha and has a strong resemblance to the now deceased Minato Namikaze. Appearance. Long red, blonde hair without illusionary seal and eyes tend to change to an unknown dujutsu with a strong resemblance to the Sharingan. With his seal he has the stature of a 12-year-old with spiky blonde hair and sapphire blue eyes. In the photo he did have a strong resemblance, but his right hand was covered in bandages. His eyes without the appearance were a purple-gray color, and stood at least at Kakashi's height. Turning to the page after it they saw this. Hinata, Daiden Shi, Yuhi. Affiliation. Konoha with no actual known rank, but like the Ryuketsu no Kitsune appears 15 without the illusionary seal. Rank. Unofficial rank, Kage, official, Unknown. Status. SS rank. Affinities. Ration, Futon. Any other affinities are unknown. Kenjutsu. Unknown, but seen carrying a wrapped katana at her hip. Taijutsu. Hai Sanin, seen using Hyuga Taijutsu and the use of Tsunade's super strength. Ninjutsu. Hai Kage, seen having a mastery of her Suiten affinity comparable to the second Hokage. Genjutsu. Unknown. Fuinjutsu. Unknown. Bounty. See Ryuketsu no Kitsune. Note. Without the black mask with feather marks falling, she is seen wearing a white cloth over her eyes. Without it is seen with eyes similar to the Hyuga. Appearance. Without the illusionary seal is seen at the age of a 15-year-old with long midnight blue hair reaching mid-back. Warning. Both these two are easily capable of destroying a village single-handedly. If you're suicidal, do not confront these two ninja. Standing similar to Naruto's height in the photo with the easily pissed-off look on her face from a photo in a fight against some ninja. He asked, how the photo doesn't really do us justice, huh Hinaheim? Shaking her head she replied, no not really, but Tsunami-san, if the only reason you quit being a ninja would you want to join the Leaf, we could use another Kenjutsu expert besides Hinata, myself and 2 others in the village. She thought it over and Tazuna said, I always wanted a change in scenery here, not that I don't like wave, but the fog is something one can find rather old. She said, here Inari always wanted to live somewhere more lively with people his own age. I'll talk with Inari about it. Accepting that answer he looked at the 4 downed ninja while noticing Akamaru was still in his arms. He said, what are we going to do about those 4? Shrugging she said, toss them outside? They nodded saying, oh yes, I'm sure we're going to get along just fine Tsunami-san. Just fine indeed. Next week at the bridge. At the end of the week the 2 teams decided to keep watch at the bridge while trusting Tsunami to keep an eye out at the village in case Gato had someone trying to attack the village as insurance. Once everyone arrived at the bridge, everyone there was unconscious except for one man who Tazuna asked, what happened here? A demon. The man said before passing out as the mist rolled in creating a screen. Naruto said, Hinata, do you see anyone around us? Activating her Byakugan she said, yay, Zabuza's back and he has 2 people with him, both boys. Makes you wonder, huh? He said, grinning, causing Hinata and Kurenai to giggle while Shino let out a light laugh. Zabuza, who heard them, shouted out, what's that supposed to mean, you brat? Using his wind affinity he blasted the bridge with his chakra, removing the mist. He saw 2 men, but one was recognizable as an Aoi Rokusho. At his hip was the sword that belonged to his and Tsunade's family, the sword of the Thunder God. He said, wow Zabuza, you needed help with these couple of brats. Hey, they wouldn't stand a chance against my legendary blade. Rolling his eyes he said, shut up you idiot, don't read the bingo book. Look at the blonde and the blue-haired girl, who the hell do they look like? A couple of wannabe ninja just like the rest of their ragtag group. He said arrogantly, only to be blasted with killer intent. He fell to his knee and looked to see it coming from the 2 he had mentioned. Naruto said, geez Zabu-chan, if you were going to call for backup I had hoped it would be someone with a spine, not some 2-bit thief with an ego. Ignoring the cries of indignation he reined in his ki and drew Tensa Zanjetsu, saying, oh well, a beggar cannot be a chooser. Hinata-chan, could you handle our masked friend while I take these 2? Looking out of the corner of her eye she said, and what's in it for me, Naru-kun? Pulling out an IOU he said, this is redeemable whenever you like within the month of acquiring it, so since we're in the end of the month you have until the last day of next month to use it. Nodding she grabbed it from him and kissed his cheek before charging the masked nin and grabbed him by the throat and tossed him off the edge of the bridge. He turned to the others and said, can you keep an eye on the bridge in case Gato tries something? I already got Tsunami being my eyes and ears in the village. Before Kakashi could object she nodded saying, you can leave this to us, you deal with them. Grinning he made a clone appear out of the darkness in his shadow and said, let's rock. Play, Hypnotized, by Pillar. Both disappeared and appeared in front of the two swordsmen, kicking them off the edge of the bridge, causing the two of them to grunt in pain as they fell of the bridge. "Alright brat, I'll show you not to mess with Aoi Rokusho," he screamed, charging at Naruto's sword raised, making him to look uninterested as he dodged the strike and punted him into Zabuza, who was going to attack his back, making them tumble across the water. He chuckled watching the two of them argue with each other. "Watch where you're going, you brow-less freak." "Fuck you, you prepubescent pretty boy," said the eyebrow-less freak. Ladies, you're both pretty, can we get back to the fight?" Naruto said, getting bored, thinking, wonder how Hinata's fight is going. "With Hinata, I must apologize but I must win," the masked boy said as he formed several hand signs shouting out, "Hyeten! Makio Hyosho, demonic crystal ice mirrors." Surrounding them was a dome made out of full-body mirrors made out of ice from the side to the top, and was even freezing the water around the ground. He said, "You might as well give up in this dome, you can't defeat me." It seems he's from the same clan as Tsunami-chan, maybe I can get him to join us," she thought, dodging Senbon needles. Watching closely, she noticed with her Byakugan that the images in the ice were after images as he leaves them at high speeds, as one reflection always had more than the other. She thought, "Yay, that just might work." Forming a few hand signs, she said, "Futon. Fu Ryu o Hikasaku, tearing wind dragon." A large whirlwind whipped around in the dome as a western dragon formed out of the wind as it beat its wings, destroying the mirrors when it vanished when it flew away into the sky. She thought, damn, my control over the wind isn't as good as Naruto's, but my plan worked. She watched Haku fall from the sky as he was carried with the dragon and crashed onto the water littered with cuts and tears. "You've lost Haku Yuki," she said, making him look up in surprise, and said, "Surprised? Our client's daughter is a member of the Yuki clan, including her son, though he doesn't know of his heritage. You don't have to resign to this fate, Haku. You can come with us back to the Leaf and stop having to fight every day outside a village to live another day thinking this was your last." He remained silent as she looked over to the side and decided to bind him and said while sitting on the water, "Let's watch them get their asses handed to them by Naruto-kun." "Who is he?" he asked as Naruto ducked and dodged and danced around their blades. Looking at him out of the corner of her eyes, she said, "My boyfriend." Back with Naruto, while he danced around the blades and said, "Looks like Hinata won her fight rather easily." He flipped far away from them and formed several hand signs shouting out, "Futon. Fukushu no Arashi no Kaminatani no Kaze, Valley Wind of the Vengeful Storm God." A violet wind came crashing from behind him and went flying at the two ninja, who managed to find support from the beams of the bridge, suffering serious damage. Zabuza was the least damaged of the two thanks to blocking the attack with his Zanbatsu, but lost the upper half of the blade in the process thanks to pressure. The wind came at him and damaged a few ribs and serious internal bleeding. Aoi, on the other hand, he didn't survive long enough to hit the beam. When the wind hit, it put so much pressure on his heart he died from his heart exploding in his chest. Making his way over to the sword, he grabbed it and sealed it into his arm after decapitating Aoi with it, and sealed the head in a scroll. He said, "Sorry for forgetting about you, Zabuza, but it seems I've got to finish this quickly since you can't keep my interest." Before he could speak, he had Tensa Zangetsu shoved into his throat, killing him in an instant. Grabbing Zabuza's Kabikirabocho, and with what blood wasn't in the water was absorbed by the blade, making him think, useful sword. End song. Making his way towards Hinata, he saw the masked ninja who, if Hinata hadn't have told us he was a boy, he would mistaken him for a girl. He said, "And you're a Yuki, aren't you?" The boy nodded, saying, "My name's Haku from the Yuki clan, from what Hinata-sans told me." "And speaking of, can you get off me now?" Nodding, allowing him to stand, he continued, "Now where was I? Oh right, you said there were more Yuki clan members here and were leaving with you to go to your village?" Naruto grinned and nodded when he paused, looking past him to where the village was, and asked, "Haku, where is Gato and his men now? Should be at his hideout? Why, I may not know you, but I don't like that look on your face," he asked, only for Naruto to point past his head, making him and Hinata turn, causing them both to go wide-eyed. "The village. Come on Haku, Hinata, we gotta get the others and get to the village. Tsunami isn't going to be able to handle them alone on her own," he shouted, dashing past them with Hinata's voice fading into the background as he sped past the others on the bridge. "Come on, we can catch up with him later, but first let's get the others." With Tsunami. "Damn, I knew Gato would try something, but this is ridiculous. I thought as I've killed my 1000th thug. I mean, I know the fat pig doesn't plan on paying them, but where did he find all of them? Good thing I evacuated everyone in the village. A kunai flew past hitting something causing me to turn as I heard a gurgling sound only to see it was another thug. Man, am I happy I made it on time. Next to me Naruto appeared in a blackish-purple flash making me think, Hirai-san. So Naruto-kun decided to join the party. If I had known I would have served drinks, I joked trying to make light of the situation. Where's the townspeople? He asked as his face showed this wasn't the time for jokes, which I found quite attractive on one. So you wonder if that Hinata girl is willing to share. Kami knows Inari needs a father and it seems he's taken quite a shine to him as is. Replying, still slightly checking him out. I got them all out of the village a safe ways away. The village is empty. Tsunami-chan, look out, he shouted as I was pulled down by my shirt, narrowly dodging a sword to the neck as Naruto kicked him back. She said, thanks for the save. Naruto cut 3 guys down. He said, save the thanks for when we make it through this alive. Know any large-scale jutsu? I only gave a nod in affirmation when he said, good, I want you to keep an eye out for Hinata and the others. They're going to be coming this way soon. Once you see them, get them as far back as possible, then trap the thugs in one spot. I'm gonna finish them in one blow. I only nodded, wondering what he was about to do, when I heard a, hey Tsunami Naruto. Looking in that direction, I had turned to see the others with some stranger. Kurenai said, where's Naruto? I pointed towards the growing piles of bodies. When everyone looked towards the carnage, they could see he was covered from head to toe in blood with a dark grin on his face. Sakura stated, he's a monster. I smacked her upside the head and said, he's not a monster, he's doing what he has to ensure everyone survives. Now if you all would go to the hill, he and I can start his plan. Kakashi said, what plan? Dragging my father and the others to where I took the villagers. Inari hugged me crying. I said, he asked me if I knew any strong wide-scale jutsu. And from this distance I'm sure it will work. Ignoring their questions, I formed hundreds of hand seals and shouted, Hyeten, Kori no Juno Weja Rareta Furudo, Forgotten Field of the Ice Queen. The ground underneath the village froze completely, sticking the thugs to the ground when Naruto jumped up to the cliff with us. Kakashi grabbed Naruto by the wrist when he joined them and said, Naruto, I demand you tell me what's going on. Wrenching his wrist from Kakashi's grasp, he said in an emotionless tone, with his eyes changing from the blue they knew him for to a dark edgy purple. Don't you think you should focus on the situation and over your ego, Hitaki? Now if you excuse me, I've got some thugs to exterminate. Turning to the civilians, he shouted, gaining their attention, attention everyone, what I am about to do is going to result in the destruction of the property of the village, but rest assured by the end of the day, 3 days from now, all your homes will be restored free from Gato's reign. He patted Inari on the head. Walking past them, he said, I told you, Inari, that if you trust me I will never betray you, and as soon as I've dealt with these thugs you can expect his head on a pike. Forming 2 clones with him as the main attacker, he shouted out, Enten. Goka Ribayasan no Hakai Chisei, destructive reign of the Hellfire Leviathan. Taking in a deep breath, billows of black smoke began to flare out of his nose and his skin began to turn red. Bits of black flaming embers escaped from the gaps of his teeth. Once he was no longer able to hold it, he blew out a large 3-headed Leviathan with glowing yellow eyes. The very image alone gave everyone behind them a sense of fear. Turned to them and said, fade in a sea of darkness. Gesturing to the thugs on the ground, the ethereal flames being charged to the ground, enveloping the entire village in a sea of black flames. Seeing him look down at the remains above as the black fire gave him an ethereal glow, making me get hotter. Judging from Hinata and Shino, they feel the same, while Kurenai had a look of concern. Looking towards me and the others, he said, Tsunami, can you, Kurenai and Hinata, keep things going here? I nodded, seeing the look in his eye, and asked, why? What are you going to do? Glaring at the sea of flames, he said, I'm going to roast a pig, jumping over the edge, making all of us run to the edge only to see him vanish in a flash of ethereal light. Something tugged my sleeve as Inari asked, Mom, how did you do that? I had to be given the task of telling a secret. Oh, you owe me, Naruto. I thought, saying, well son, that's a interesting story. With Naruto, I hate senseless destruction. I'm gonna enjoy killing that pathetic worm, I thought, enjoying the dark images of him being tortured and screaming for mercy. Being cut from my thoughts, I came to the location Hiku had told me as I came across a group of thugs talking about using the women in the village for their entertainment since the ones in the tower were too loose for their taste. They're going to die first. Pulling out Yamato, I grinned and started cackling, which carried through the forest, making the two thugs getting edgy. I said with homicidal glee. The Ryuketsu no Kitsune is BAAAACCCCCKKKKK. With the others. Once Naruto's clones had doused the flames with a couple of high-quality sweetened jutsu, the sounds of blood-curdling screams rang through the air, making everyone freeze in their place. Kiba asked, "What the hell was that?" Everyone else besides Hinata and Kurenai went rimrod as sounds of insane laughter rang though the air, making Tsunami ask, "Hinata, you don't seem surprised by the sounds?" She turned to them with a dark grin on her face and said, "Naru-kun is gonna kill a certain pig." Inari perked up and said, "I knew he'd keep his word." Smiling at her son, she said, while Hinata and Kurenai looked at her knowingly as she said, "That he will, Sochi, that he will." Everyone continued to listen to the unsettling screams and laughter as the clones made clones of their own and began cutting down trees to rebuild the once destroyed homes, already getting a large number of them rebuilt in the span of an hour. Another 4, and everyone heard whistling ring through the air as it continued to get closer. He appeared next to Hinata with a large scroll on his back with one in his hand and said, "Hello all, isn't it a wondrous day?" The insane grin still plastered on his face. She turned to him, kissing his blood-soaked cheek, saying with no form of disgust, "Hey Naru-kun, you're filthy." Looking at himself, he whistled and said, "Wow, I guess I am. But the pig bleed more than I thought in my defense." Laughing lightly, she said, "I'll bet Naruto-kun, but that blood tastes horrible, like curdled milk and gym socks." He still had the insane look on his face, but with a pout as he said, "I'm sure I don't taste or smell that bad now." Deadpanning, she said, "Yea you do, and speaking of the pig, what'd you do to him?" He just pointed a little past where the bridge was being built and started to count down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ding. A large mushroom cloud appeared with a shockwave as he laughed when Kurenai tapped him on the shoulder, saying, "Naruto." He turned to her and gets a quick jab on the back of his head, causing him to gain an emotionless expression. He said coolly, "Thanks Hinata-chan." Having enough of the insanity in today's events, Kakashi shouted, "Naruto. What the hell is going on, and how do you know those jutsu?" Looking at him, he simply replied with indifference, "There's no reason to answer you, Hitaki. If you want answers, go to Hokage-sama if he trusts you enough to answer you." Walking to Inari, giving a false smile, he said, "Told you I'd keep my word." He didn't give a response. Instead, he tackled him and hugged him like he was his lifeline, making everyone smile at the view. It would have been more heartfelt if it wasn't for him being soaked from head to toe in blood. Prying him off of him, he said, "I don't think your mom would be pleased with the fact she would have to burn a pair of perfectly good clothes due to the bloodstains, kiddo." Looking at himself, he nodded and said, "All right, Ni-san." That brought an honest smile to his face, thinking, first Konohamaru, now Inari. That's great, but it seems his mom is interested in me. That's gonna cause some problems, though. I wonder how Hinata's gonna react. He turned to the cliffside and saw his clones were already close to finishing rebuilding the village when he turned to see Sasuke glaring at him. Sighing in annoyance, he said, "What is it, Sasuke-san? I demand you give me your weapons and jutsu." He demanded only to get backhanded. "Now see here, Uchiha, just because Hinata hit a pressure point that cut off my emotions doesn't mean she didn't hit the point where I won't rip your head from your shoulders. Got me? I am in no mood to have my patience tested," Naruto said, staring at him with uninterest. Making his way back to Tazuna's home, he said, "If you all need me, I'm gonna clean up and send a report to Hokage-sama, so excuse me as I have another set of clothes to burn." Walking away, he vanished in the brush of the forest, ignoring the scathing looks the last of Team 7 and a certain dog user were sending his way as Hinata. The trio of Hyden carriers followed behind them. Hiruzen could see from his looking ball that Naruto's patience was wearing thin and wasn't surprised due to the letters he was sent from him and Hinata about the ongoing events away from the team's actions and their training, and to say he was pissed. Watching the events happen from the orb, he saw several shinobi get cut down by him while he wore an expression that said he had little care for them at this point. Hearing Naruto knock on the door, he put his pipe down, letting them in. The first thing he saw was Naruto, Kurenai, Hinata and Shino, with 3 new faces, all wearing an annoyed expression. The others were ignorant, with Kakashi reading his porn, which was ripped from his hands by Naruto after being burned to ashes, while the other 3 were glaring at Naruto. "Ah, Team 7, 8, welcome back. Care to report?" he said, watching Kakashi and Sasuke walk forward before belting them with ki, making them back off. He said, "From someone I trust," meaning Naruto, Kurenai, Hinata, and Shino. They stepped forward as they regaled the events from the start of the mission to the finish, omitting the steamy events. The Sandaime was pissed. He continued to glare at the four on the right while looking to the left and had them continued from the disobedience the others had for their authority and their misconduct. Sighing, Sarutobi said, "Naruto, Hinata, Shino, Kiba, Sakura, Sasuke, Tsunami-san, Inari-kun. Haku-kun, could you stand outside for a moment?" Naruto and his group obeyed while Kiba and the others stood there till they were yanked out and stood in the hall with the others. With Naruto and the others outside. "Man, I'm tired," Naruto said, yawning till Hinata grabbed his head and put it on her lap as she sat on a bench with him on her left while Haku and Inari to their right. "Wonder what they're talking about. You know Naruto-kun?" she said, combing her hand through his hair, getting a sigh of appreciation. "Nope, but the look he was shooting Kakashi was one that could scare death," Naruto said when the walls shook as faint yelling could be heard, making him whistle at the use of profanity he used. Everyone listened to this for a half hour till Kakashi walked out with his head down. He said, "Sasuke, Sakura, Kiba, come on, we meet tomorrow at Training Ground 7. That shocked everyone while they appreciated the look of humility he had. What he said put Naruto, Shino and Hinata in shocked appreciation, while Kiba didn't want to hear how the Dobi was making moves on his woman but chose not to speak and walked away with Kakashi and his two teammates after shooting Naruto with a dark glare. Hinata said, Kurenai-sensei, what just happened?" Everyone else was wondering the same thing when she told them to come back in the office. "Back in the office? Okay, not that I didn't enjoy the utter look of defeat on Kakashi Tomi's face, but what happened?" Naruto asked. "Well, after reviewing the reports you gave from your time on Team 7 and the mission in Wave as leader, I deemed that you would be better suited on Team 8 with Kurenai and our newest Chunin if she'd accept," Sarutobi said while looking at Tsunami. Shocked, she asked, "But why would you want me as a shinobi, Hokage-sama? From not Naruto's report and the record you hold, you said you left Kiri due to being pregnant with young Inari-kun here. Due to this you didn't want him harmed from the civil war in Kiri. Now that he's old enough to enter the academy, you can take up active role with Kurenai and aid her with training this young group of ninja, and seeing as someone with the skill Haku has, it would be a waste to leave him on reserve," the aged Kage said professionally, stating the facts of the recent events that have passed. Everyone could see the reasoning and agreed when Naruto said, "You do know that the civilian council will be on Tsunami-chan, Haku and Inari's ass because of their bloodline, right?" To his surprise, the professor said, "Oh, Naruto-kun, you should have a bit of faith in this old man. I'm not the professor of shinobi for nothing. But to other business, the Chunin exams are coming up, and even though Haku has the skills to be a Tokubetsu Chunin, he needs practice working with others. Are you going to sign up your team, Kurenai, Tsunami?" Looking at the four ninja, they studied them and knew that with even Hinata and Naruto alone they could get far. With the four of them they could handle anything thrown their way. Nodding, the two Chunin said, "Kurenai Yuhi and Tsunami Yuki, Chunin senseis of Team 8 hereby sign up Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Yuhi, Shino Aburame, and Haku Yuki for this year's Chunin exams. Alright Chunin sensei, today is the Chunin exams, step up if you feel they are ready," Sarutobi had said when Kurenai and Tsunami of Squad 8, Asuma of Squad 10, Kakashi of Squad 7 and Guy of Squad 9 stepped forward, as well as surprisingly Anko Mitarashi of the new Squad 11. Asuma said, "Asuma Sarutobi Chunin of Squad 9 consisting of Shikamori Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka would like these three to be instated for the Chunin exams." Kurenai and Tsunami stepped forward and said, "Kurenai Yuhi and Tsunami Yuki joint Chunin of Squad 8 consisting of Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Yuhi, Shina Aburame and Haku Yuki would like these four to be instated for these exams." Kakashi scoffed and said proudly, "Kakashi Hitaki Chunin of Squad 7 consisting of Sasuke Uchiha, Kiba Inuzuka and Sakura Haruno would like to be instated for the Chunin exams." Mike Guy said, "Mike Guy Chunin of Squad 9 consisting of Neji Hyuga, Rock Lee, and Tenten Higurashi would like to be instated for these youthful exams." Anko stepped forward and said, "Anko Mitarashi new Chunin of Squad 11 would like my three cute little genin to be instated for the Chunin exams." He nodded when Kakashi said, "Hokage-sama, is it wise to have Naruto a part of these exams? He has so little training?" Everyone was disgusted when the Hokage said, "Are you questioning me, Chunin? Because from the mission report you and Team 8 you've done nothing but focus on the Uchiha and leave the others to fend for themselves, and when Naruto showed skill you belittled him and tried to embarrass him at every turn, if not demand he hand over his techniques. Everyone snickered as he glared into his book hatefully at the Hokage, which he sensed, and said, "Hitaki, if you don't remove that glare you can turn in your shinobi license." He stopped and said, "Alright, have your genin sign these waivers and have them report at room 301 next Tuesday." They nodded and shunshined out of the room, ignoring the glare Kakashi sent to Kurenai and Tsunade. With Naruto and Team 8 at the same time. "Hey boss." The new Team 8 heard, making them turn to see young Konohamaru Sarutobi, the grandson of Hiruzen Sarutobi, running up to him along with his two friends Moegi and Udon running towards him as the four genin make their way through an alleyway. "Sup little bro, what are you three doing out here during class?" he said curiously, since it isn't their lunch break or anything like that. He said, "I was wondering if you could help me with something." Before he could answer, a snide voice came from the end of the alley. "Why would you want Naruto Baka to help when Sasuke-kun is so much better?" Turning, Konohamaru said, "Boss, is she your?" while holding up his pinky only to get a punch to the top of his head, saying, "No, actually these two ladies are," pointing towards Hinata and Shina, who dressed in the Aburame clan female clothing consisting of a tighter shirt with no high collar showing her feminine face and figure. The three academy students said, "Thank goodness, because you could do so much better than her." Moegi said, "Is her forehead supposed to stick out that far?" The three kids began asking more questions, pushing her buttons, when she screeched, making Naruto say, "Speed training, run you three." They took off, leaving smoke figures of themselves where they once stood with Sakura hot on their heels when a shout came not too far away. He sighed and said, "Let's go see what happened." They nodded and ran after them, coming to see two genin, one with four pigtails wearing a battle dress that came a little above the calf, wearing a fishnet bodysuit holding a giant fan. And a boy wearing makeup in a bodysuit with cat ears on the top of the outfit with a giant wrapped up object on his back holding Konohamaru by his scarf. Naruto said, "Hey, let the kid go." They turned towards him and the kid turned his focus towards Naruto, saying, "And what are you going to do about it, Squirt? This brat's gonna pay for running into me." Smirking, Naruto vanished and appeared behind him with his sword at his throat and his other hand on the girl's shoulder, saying, "1. That's the Hokage's grandson. If you hit him you will be kicked out of the exams and could be grounds for war. 2. If I didn't do anything then the Anbu on the buildings around this alley will." Before they could say anything he said, "Oh, and duck ass, Mud and Mr. One, please come down." They looked at the tree and saw Sasuke sitting on a branch with Kiba above him with a red-headed boy with marks around his eyes hanging underneath Sasuke, but disappeared in a shower of sand while Sasuke and Kiba hopped down as Naruto appeared next to his team with Konohamaru. From Naruto's point of view, the two genin were afraid of their teammate for some reason, which was answered when the tall one said, "Gee Gaara, it wasn't what it." "Shut up or I'll kill you," the now identified redhead said when Sakura decided to make her presence known. "What are three genin from Tsunade doing here in the leaf?" she said, making teams 8 and Sand minus Gaara shake their heads. "They're here for the Chunin exams, an exam held twice a year where genin take a series of tests to see if they have what it takes to be promoted to Chunin," Naruto said, making the blonde say, "At least someone here has common sense." Gaara said, "You. What's your name?" Kiba and Sasuke, thinking he meant them, and said, "I'm not you too." "You the blonde," Gaara said, blowing off the two genin, putting his sights on Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki, and you three are?" he replied. "Subaku no Tamari, Subaku no Kankuro, Subaku no Gaara," the three said after each other. He nodded and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you three. I'll guess we will be seeing each other at the exams. Konohamaru, go back to the academy, all right?" They nodded, running off with Naruto and his team continuing their way to their team's training ground where Tsunade and Kurenai were waiting. Kurenai said, "Good, you're here on time. We got good news for you four." Tsunade brought out 4 sign-up sheets and said, "We voted for you all to take this year's Chunin exam. With your skill the 4 of you should blow through it with no difficulty." Nodding, she handed out the sheets and said, "Sign those and report to the academy at room 301 next week." They put their waivers in their pouch after signing them as Kurenai said, "Now we're going to be doing some spars, then individual training. Get ready." Ever since they became a group, Kurenai had become slightly sadistic in some aspects, mainly in combat and training, making the 4 genin groan. 1 week later. Man, I can't wait for these exams to start, Naruto said with the others nodding as they walked up the stairs when they saw something, a group of genin outside the door that said, 301, making Naruto speak through the mental communication seal he developed and said, didn't we only walk up one flight? They nodded as Haku said, what do we do? We can't draw too much suspicion, the less competition the better our odds. Sheena said, we could walk on the ceiling and slip past? They nodded, agreeing with her plan, and were almost there when they heard an annoying voice. Drop the genjutsu, this is only the second floor. The two genin sitting in front of the door said, good eye, but instead of trying to show off you should have followed their example. Pointing up they came to see Naruto and the others of Team 8 standing above the large mob when Naruto said, good going jackass, you just made these exams even more difficult. Tamari said, what do you mean? What Naruto-kun means is that this was to separate the men from the boys to see if they could get past the genjutsu. Thanks to the bastard over there, though everyone has more competition to deal with, Hinata said with the others nodding as they fell to the ground gracefully and walked into the door, ignoring the glare a white-eyed boy was sending Hinata's way. Outside room 301. Man, Sasuke is such a pain in the ass, Naruto said, getting several nods from the others when they spotted Kurenai and Tsunami. Hey Kurenai-sensei. Tsunami-sensei, what's up, why are you two here? Hinata said, getting a smile from the two Chunin. Kurenai said, we just came to wish you 4 luck, we know you can handle whatever is thrown your way. Giving them all a strong hug, they shunshined out of the hall, leaving the 4 genin to stand outside the door. Well team, you ready? We're aiming for number 1. Naruto said with the others nodding. In room 301. When the 4 walked in they were hit with a small amount of ki, making them scoff when Haku said, how about you show them real killer intent, Itoko? He nodded and flooded his ki in the room, making them pale and turn their attention back to the front, save for the 3 cloaked figures, making his eyes go wide, saying, it's them. Who? Sheena said. The 3 I fought in the forest just outside Tazuna's house, they're here. The cloaked figures by the far wall, he said, making them look to the right when he was hugged by a pair of arms. You're here, things are going to be troublesome, Naru-kun, Shikamori said, holding onto his left arm while Ino held his right. Choji walked up and said, long time no see Naruto, you know we still got that eating competition to finish, right? With a chuckle he said, I know, but I'm still ahead by 5 bowls of ramen, you know? A dark cloud appeared over his head, muttering, I never W and over, making Naruto and the others laugh when the door opened again with Kiba and Sasuke looking like they got their asses handed to them while Sakura remained fine. Choji said, dude, what happened to you guys? They just grumbled when Kiba came out boasting about, all you losers can go home now because the top dog is gonna win it all. The room filled with killer intent while Team 10 and 8 were immune to it 7 and the others were greatly intimidated when a voice came out and said, man, could you guys quiet down? If you haven't noticed, this isn't a social gathering. They turned to see a boy with silver hair in a ponytail with his leaf headband on his forehead and glasses on his nose. Naruto thought, guys, you feeling the same vibe I am from this guy and that scent medicine, blood and snakes? Did Anko Haim take an apprentice or something? Looking closer at him, Hinata gasped and said, Naruto-kun, he has a genjutsu over his headband, it's so small a change nobody noticed, and that scent is coming from that other genin from Kusa, the one with the ponytail, but it's worse. Lightly looking in the Kusa team's direction he thought, great, and there are only 2 snake summoners I know, and Anko-chan never let anyone else sign the snake contract, meaning we have a pale garden snake in these exams, but what could he be here for? They heard him introduce himself as Kabuto Yakushi. It's a pleasure to meet you all, now I got information on everything you need for these exams. Sasuke, being the wise ass, said, I want information on Rock Lee, Subaku no Gaara and Naruto Uzumaki. Knowing that was going to happen and let it for Lee and Gaara, but when he got to him Naruto snatched the card from him and read, well, he just made our job easier, he is a spy, he has information on me that only the Hokage should know. Channeling his Enten affinity through the paper he said, a ninja has got to keep his secrets, Yakushi-san. Kiba and Sasuke were seething, missing the chance to get info on the blonde and learn some of his secrets when the proctor came in and said, alright maggots, sit down and shut up, I'm Ibiki Morino, your proctor for the first exam, take your number and sit in your seats, but know this, if you're caught cheating 3 times you're out of the exam along with your teammates. Getting their seats, almost everyone were separated from their respective teams, but thanks to the seals they had on their person, Naruto and Team 8 finished it within half an hour when Naruto decided to prop his feet up on his desk after flipping his paper over, closing his eyes. With the Chunin, there's no way the kid could have finished that quickly, Asuma said, seeing everything that's happened through a television screen in the lounge. Kakashi said, "Guess your team's leaving early, Hayuhi." She only smirked and said, "And that's why you're a fool, Hitaki." The reason he was known as the dead last in the academy wasn't because he was stupid, but because he just didn't find the work they gave a challenge. Hell, he's as smart, if not smarter, than Shikaku and Shikimori together. That made the other Chunin look at her in surprise, while Anko was already aware of his overlooked talents. Asuma said, "But how does that explain him failing the graduation exam 3 times? Anko said, "That's a twofold answer. Part on is due to his reserves and its density. It is absolutely impossible to do even the simplest of jutsu no matter the amount of control he has. And also he chose to fail the first 2 exams so he could graduate with his friends. Otherwise he would have broken Itachi's record for promotion." Kakashi scoffed and said, "He's still a failure. And that's all he will be once he faces Sasuke. You'll be agreeing with me soon." Nobody paid him any attention when Anko said, "Check the screen, I gotta do my part." Turning their attention back to the screen as she shunshined out of the room. With the genin, Ibiki had just finished throwing everyone but teams 8 and 10 off mentally when he said, "If nobody else is gonna give up, you all pass." Ibiki-san, you might want to take a step back 4 paces, Naruto said as he pointed towards the window with a growing shadow smashing through the window. Unfurling it revealed Anko Mitarashi with a sign behind her saying, "The amazingly why Anko Mitarashi." Scooping out everyone, taking notice of her 3 genin and her love, Naruto with his team saying, "What the hell, Ibiki, the number of genin teams barely dropped. I mean, what, 4 teams dropped out?" He said, "Guess we got a decent crop this year, Anko, but don't you think you got something to say to the group before us?" Scratching the back of her head she said, "Right. Alright Gakis, I'm the second proctor of the Chunin exams. Anko Mitarashi, you are to meet at training ground 44 in 10 minutes or you're disqualified for being late." With that said, she shunshined out of the examination room, making everyone else run out of the room while Naruto and his team shunshined there, being followed by the mystery team. Ibiki began to collect the papers when he came across a note on Naruto's paper. "Dear Ibiki, please alert Hokage-sama that there is a snake in the village and he has a spy named Kabuto Yakushi. It seems he's taken these exams 7 times prior and has info cards on almost everyone in the exams, me included, with information only the Hokage and I with a select few have knowledge of. If he's here and knowing that slithering worm he will. I'll try to handle him till help arrives during the second exam." Shocked, he said before shining out of the room, "I better get this to Hokage-sama and fast." At the Forest of Death. "Hey Anko-chan, we don't even get a how do you do, makes me think you don't love me anymore," Naruto said, pretending to cry when she hugged him and the others. She said, "Sorry Naru-kun, but there were some missions I had to do and take a genin team for myself." Shrugging, he said while hugging her, "Be careful, Orochimaru is here in the Chunin exams among us. I know you want your revenge, but let me deal with him if I see him. I already sent an alert to the old man, so please be careful and be cautious around Kabuto Yakushi." She nodded and said, "What team is the bastard with?" "Kusa. He's the girl with her hair in a ponytail, do you smell it?" "The decay of death," he said, getting a nod from her. Once everyone gathered, she said, "Alright everyone, here is Konoha's most dangerous training ground, the Forest of Death, where the most gruesome creatures, insects and plant life reside. Here is a place even the Anbu fear going near, and those few who do rarely leave. Your goal is to gather 2 scrolls, one from here and one from your enemy." Pausing, she pulled out 2 scrolls, one that said heaven, the other that said earth. Once you get both, you have to get to the center of the tower in the time frame of 5 days. And a quick note, you can't open the scroll till you get to the tower. Grabbing a pile of flyers, a random genin asked, "What are those for exactly?" A bloodthirsty grin spread across her face, making everyone tense, and said, "It's a liability waiver to state that should a genin die, we are not held responsible by their village for that genin team's death." Everyone sweat drop at her nonchalant response and signed their waivers and got their scrolls, Team 8 holding the heaven scroll in Naruto's containment seal on his shoulder. Taking position at the gate, they swung open, starting the beginning of the second stage when screams echoed through the air, not 10 minutes in, causing Anko to sigh in content, saying, music to my ears. With Team 8, the group of 4 were seen hopping through the trees when Hinata asked, "What's the plan, Naruto-kun, and what scroll do we need?" "None," he nonchalantly, nearly making everyone stumble. Much to his enjoyment, he continued, "When I went to get our scroll, the one handing them out was on the verge of falling asleep, so when he closed his eyes I swiped the earth scroll. All we need to do is head to the tower." Everyone was quiet for a moment till Haku said, "You're the most unpredictable person I've ever had the pleasure of knowing, Kusan." Smiling, he only said, "I know, Haku. I know, but for now let's get somewhere to rest for a moment and plan from there. While I'd rather not be in here longer than necessary with Orochimaru out here, I can guess his target is the Uchiha and Kami forbid Kakashi throws a bitch fit because something happened to his sole student and not give a damn about the other two." They had to agree with him on that, so they picked a big enough tree hollow and set up camp for a moment, with Naruto sending clones to scout the area so they know where Orochimaru is, while he and the others sat in the hollow under a genjutsu strong enough for them to be overlooked by passing teams. He looked over at his team and saw them sleeping when he felt one of his clones dispel, thinking, "Shit, he's here in the forest, gotta get them to the tower and fast." Making some clones, he had them grab the others and said, "Get them to the tower, stop for nothing, you understand? When you get there, open the scrolls and get help." They saluted him and jumped through the trees with Shina, Hinata and Haku on their backs to the tower. He thought, "This is an ass-kicking that was long since overdue, Orochimaru, and if I know you, I know where you are." He ran in the direction he felt Orochimaru's chakra and dashed, fully intent on eliminating Orochimaru, oblivious to the shadows that fell behind him. With Orochimaru and Team 7, "Come on, freak!" Naruto heard the distinctive shout of Kiba, and from his point of view the three of them couldn't be in a better position. Kiba was black and blue, with a second Kiba hanging from over a tree branch unconscious, which he guessed was Akamaru. Sakura was paralyzed with fear and Sasuke was unconscious, holding his neck in pain. Casting a genjutsu over the three, sending them into a state of unconsciousness, he said, "If it isn't a certain snake bastard Orochimaru, my second most hated person connected to the leaf." He looked up and said inquisitively, "Oh, it's the Kyuubi brat, and what do you mean second most?" Pulling out his sword, he said, "A certain toad decided to make my life hell by lying to my godmother and told her I died while spending the money my parents left me on booze and girls. So after I skin you alive, you can guess who I'm going for." Chuckling, he regurgitated his Kusanagi and said, "Well, first you're going to have to beat me, child, and you're years too young to defeat me. Though admittedly I may have done some horrible things, but that is something even I find deplorable." He smirked, getting into his position, and said with a crazed smile as killer intent flooded the vicinity, "Well, we won't know till we try now, won't we? Play, promised ones, by bless the fall." Orochimaru was shocked by the killer intent, thinking, "What is this?" He was so shocked he didn't notice Naruto coming at him till the last second, blocking a slash to the neck with his Kusanagi, only to be sent flying back from the impact. Crashing through several branches, he grunts, spitting out some of his blood, thinking, "How did he do that? I was told he was the dead last of the academy. He shouldn't be able to push me around like this." Seeing a glint come in from his peripheral, he jumped back and formed several hand signs and said, "Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. Fire style. Fireball Jutsu." A fireball the size of a small house came flying, only to get snuffed out from a swing of Naruto's sword. He said tauntingly, "Come on, Orochi Teme, surely you can do better than this. I hope the toad does better, because if a genin can beat you, then the old man must not have taught you as well as he said he did." He growled, forming several hand signs before smearing some of his blood on the tattoo on his wrist, and shouted out, summoning jutsu. 3 large snakes came from the smoke, making Naruto smirk, saying, "Now this is a decent step forward, but..." He vanished, appearing behind him saying, "This is still not enough, Orochimaru." Turning, he received a bone-shattering kick to the ribs, causing him to fly into a tree, which broke upon impact as the snake that was in front of Orochimaru was cut to ribbons when he vanished. He thought, "He hits harder than Tsunade, and I didn't sense any chakra. What is he?" With the Naruto clones, they reached the tower when Hinata groaned, waking up, saying, "Naruto, where the hell are we? Why are we at the tower already?" The one holding her let her down as the other two did the same for the others and said, "Boss sensed Orochimaru's chakra nearby and ran to confront him." Why the hell didn't he wait for us? We could have taken him, no problem," she demanded, giving the clone a Byakugan enhanced glare, making it falter. He said, Boss didn't wait because one on this is Orochimaru we're talking about he knows the three of you can handle yourselves but let's be honest he's a slippery SOB on the off chance he got away he would have marked you and Haku and Shina and with what boss was reading from the curse seal notes if you got marked by him you three and Anko would have been under his whim. She faltered and was about to counter when he pressed on. He has yet to figure out how the mark is made in the first place if he places the mark on you three he would have more to worry about mainly trying to remove them from you now help me open these scrolls he wants us to open them and get help to hopefully apprehend him. Several shockwaves rang through the forest when he said, and judging from the shockwaves and the killer intent he's letting off he's got the bastard on the ropes. She nodded and opened the two scrolls when Tsunade and Kurenai appeared from the scrolls to congratulate them when they noticed 3 Narutos instead of 1. Tsunade was about to ask what this was about when Hinata said, "We don't have time Naruto is fighting Orochimaru get the Anbu and have them follow the shockwaves." They nodded and shunshined leaving the clones and the originals team to enter the tower. Back to the fight. Haha come on are you done yet? Naruto asked to the beaten Sannin who looked like he's seen better days his clothes were ripped and bloodied with several burns. He growled, "How are you this strong you're supposed to be a no-talent genin. Is this the fox's power?" Shaking his head he grinned and said, "Nope he's gone this is my power solely but you're not going to do much with that info." Dashing forward he cleaved his arm off holding the kusanagi and snatched it saying with a smile, "This is mine now." Ignoring Orochimaru's screams of pain when Naruto said, "Now I'm gonna finish the battle you pathetic bastard." Bringing his sword down to sever Orochimaru's head he disappeared in a puff of smoke faintly hearing the snake in the background. "Enjoy your victory now Kyuubi brat. Because next time we meet I will win. And tell sensei that if he doesn't want the village to be razed to the ground he will continue the exams without interruption." End song. Groaning he said pouting like a child, "Ah Orochi-chan is gone that was disappointing." Naruto, he turned to see Tsunade, Kurenai and the remainder of the team with several Anbu and Anko appear behind him. Waving he said, "Sup folks. Sad to say Orochi-chan but ran before I could end him. We might want to get these 3 somewhere though." He heard a bark making him look down and see Akamaru and say, "Sorry buddy I mean 4. These 4 somewhere. Akamaru did they get both scrolls?" He got a series of barks making him nod while the others had a sweat drop thinking, what is he the dog whisperer? He said that they had both scrolls so we can take them to the tower. And from what AKA here said that Orochi gave Sasuke a certain mark on his neck. He said pointing at the back of his neck making everyone nod in understanding. He picked up Akamaru holding him in his arms making sure he's comfortable he asked the Anbu if they could be carried to tower which they agreed to albeit reluctantly. Anko said, "You do know you're going to have to give a report to the old man?" He snorted saying, "Anko-chan I've been giving him reports since before me and Hinaheim were in the academy. Though what I am dreading is Hitaki." Even the Anbu groaned since his gaining the Sharingan eye he acts like he's superior to others. Grabbing them and they all left in a shunshin to the Hokage office. In the Hokage's office the collected party and several Chunin minus Hitaki he said, "Alright Naruto since Kakashi is late. Again you can start now." He nodded and was about to give his report when Kakashi burst through the door shouting, "Sasuke. Is Sasuke alright?" He looked through the room to see Sasuke unconscious alongside the rest of his team minus Akamaru who was next to Naruto who he glared at hatefully. He marched forward and grabbed him by his collar shouting, What did you do to Sasuke you little bastard?" The Chunin in the room were glaring at Kakashi when Naruto kicked him in the stomach hard making him let go and fall to his knees catching his breath he said, "One Hitaki I didn't do shit to your team I saved their sorry asses against Orochimaru." They all minus his team and the group that were aware of who he was dealing with in surprise he continued, "It seems someone didn't teach them how to escape from a threat stronger than them because Kiba was trying to fight him while Akamaru was unconscious. Sakura was sitting there being useless, and Sasuke unconsciously clutching his neck. It seems he gave Sasuke that mark. I used a genjutsu to knock them out and confronted Orochimaru." Kakashi cut him off and said, if Sasuke couldn't beat Orochimaru then what makes us believe the dead last would do any better?" Punching him in the chest he said, "Unlike the Uchiha I train myself to exhaustion and master the skills I have. The Uchiha feels just because he has a set of monkey eyes he's kami given human form and should be treated as such. thus him not standing a chance. If you don't believe me, just check the bingo book for the Ryuketsu no Kitsune and the Daiden Shi and you'll be surprised. And no, I'm not training the little shit. Turning back to the Sandane, he said, well, as I was saying before I got sidetracked, I was fighting Orochimaru where I had him on the run until the others arrived and he escaped. And if someone doesn't believe me, then how's this for proof? Pulling out the scroll, he released the contents on the table, revealing the severed arm of Orochimaru and the fabled Kusanagi, making everyone reel back in shock while some did in disbelief. He pulled them from their shock and said, he left leaving a message. Hokage-sama, he said, should the exams be cancelled, then he will raze the village to the ground. As he finished, the room fell silent while they put their focus on the Hokage, who had a contemplative look on his face and said, any ideas, people? Nobody spoke till Anko stepped forward and said, I say we pull Sasuke from the exams. With that curse mark, he could pose a potential threat to not only himself but to the other genin himself. Kakashi protested, saying, that's absurd, Sasuke a threat to nobody. Everyone looked at him like he was insane as Naruto said, get real. Hitaki the brat would kill his own team if given the chance should someone offer him power in exchange. Sarutobi said, so what's your idea, Naruto? You have any plans we could use? Now everyone's attention was on Naruto, who shrugged, saying, as much as I agree with Anko on pulling Sasuke from the exams, I say we let him attend. You saw how Kakashi was so against it. Imagine the entire civilian populace who kiss the Uchiha's ass. And knowing the council, someone there will somehow find a way to get him back in. And should Orochimaru find out Sasuke isn't in the exams, that will only infuriate him more. I say we keep a close watch on Sasuke 24/7 and up the security in the village, including its defenses. Several Chunin were curious about why, which the Hokage had asked why, which he responded with, it's simple, Hokage-sama, you see, Orochimaru let it slip with his plan a bit. As strong as he is, he alone can't destroy a village on his own. He's at least going to need the military force of 2 villages, either an old ally or some mysterious new village like Otto. Why do you say them, Naruto-kun? He asked. I say this because when we entered the first exams, Kabuto had a genjutsu over his headband. It was subtle enough that not even Kurenai-sensei would see it, but unless a censor were to check, he would get by unchecked. Kabuto has been in the exams 7 times now. Not even the dead last of any village could fail that many times. Then the information he started to give off, like various genin stats and history. My own included. And lastly, how their scent are so similar, a scent of snakes, blood and medicine. He said, listing off the reasons for why he suspects them. As everyone listened, they had to agree with his reasoning when Sarutobi said, but the only ally we have at the moment is Suna. Why are they the possible threat? Scratching his head, he said, 1. They sent a mentally unstable Jinchuriki to the village, and as you know, an unstable Jinchuriki is a dangerous Jinchuriki. Should things go south, all they have to do is get him to give control to the Biju inside him, and he alone can destroy the village. If we can get a seal on him before the attack starts, they will lose their key weapon for the war. Again, they had to agree with his logic as he continued, and we can eliminate the enemy forces in several ways. Before the finals during the month period, we can have the Anbu check the outer wall and examine the area around the village to check if the enemy has set up a site to attack from. And during so, they can attack from the inside. They will disguise themselves as civilians, most likely to have the element of surprise, and attack them from there. And we are going to need some serious muscle defending you, Hokage-sama. He raised an eyebrow and asked, why do we need someone to protect me? He sighed and said, let's be honest with ourselves, Orochimaru is no fool. He is known to have all his bases covered from attack to escape. Most likely during the finals, possibly during Gaara's fight, he will launch his attack and you're going to be his main point. He will seclude you from everyone and try to kill you. How, I don't know, but he will, and that's the difficult part. Now that got questionable looks, making him elaborate, saying, I say that's the difficult part because the other 2 parts are a simple plan that many villages use as invasion tactics. But with Orochimaru, he's going to use something that involves seals or barriers, which from what you've told me are some of the many things he excels in. If he is, he's going to do something that will prevent anyone from coming in and anyone from getting out. They nodded, making the Hokage speak up, saying, all right, for now we'll rest. I want the Anbu to keep an eye on Kabuto Yakushi. Once that's done, wait till he's alone and then apprehend him and the Auto Genin and contain them for questioning. The 4 Anbu nodded and vanished out of the room, leaving the other Chunin and Naruto's team remaining, where he continued, And as for you, I want you to keep this information to yourselves. This is a S-rank secret. The less people to know at the moment the better. If you do tell, make sure they don't speak about anything to anybody else." They nodded, allowing them all to leave the room except Naruto's team, as Kakashi grabbed his genin and left the room with Akamaru close behind as they left. Naruto said, "I'm guessing that subtle message you gave meant you wanted something, old man?" He nodded and said, "I want you to go and get Tsunade. With Orochimaru here, she's going to be needed now more than ever, especially with the upcoming invasion. There are going to be a lot of people in need of medicinal attention, and the training the medics here are not up to standard even with your clones and the medicinal training you have. We're going to need all the help we can get for this." They nodded as he said, "So when will be leaving, and where was she last seen?" "You leave the same day the preliminaries are over. She and her assistant were last seen here in Fire Country and was seen heading towards Tanzaku-gai, which is a week from here. At civilian speed it will be at best the same time. At your speed shouldn't take anything less than a day to Tanzaku and back," he said, stressing the U bit, making them nod. As they all left the room, Naruto placed a bottle on the table left for him to read. On the bottle was a note that said, "Old man, I've actually had these tested with some of my chakra and yukai, and with that and the qualities of several medicinal herbs I managed to create a special pill that will return or accelerate your age. I tested it on some clones. It will drop your age by 30 years. I'm giving you these as a twofold purpose. The first purpose is because with the threat we're facing you're going to be needed at your prime. And second, think of it as a thank you present for always looking out for me. Yours truly, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. P.S. Can I get the notes on the curse seal? I know how Orochimaru placed the curse from what Anko has told me, but I need to know what it is comprised of to remove it." He smiled, grabbing the bottle, and though as he emptied the pill onto his hand and swallowed, thinking, "Thank you, Naruto." In the tower at the Forest of Death. "Man, am I beat. I can't wait till we get to our room. I'm just gonna sleep for the remainder of the 5 days," Naruto said, popping the joints in his neck as they walked towards their room, with the others agreeing with him. Till they reached their room, their jaws dropped. It looked like something you'd see in one of those high-class inns. There were 2 beds, each being queen-sized. There was a huge couch and recliners, a large television, and the kitchen was fully stocked with food and drinks. The bathroom was huge, a walk-in shower, and a tub, and a jacuzzi big enough to comfortably fit a large group. Haku said, "I don't think I'll ever want to leave," which the others silently agree with, completely welling up with tears. Naruto looked at the others and said, "Now the only thing at hand is who are the first 2 who gets to bath first." Hinata and the others looked amongst themselves, with nobody noticing him silently inch his way to the bathroom, till he said, catching their attention, "Well, while you 3 decide amongst yourselves, I'm going to go ahead and get mine out of the way. Fighting Orochimaru left me feeling sweaty." They all froze, seeing him close the door before the fight continued amongst themselves, again ignoring the door close, leaving Hinata and Shina fighting outside the bathroom. After the debacle, once everyone bathed and cleaned the room from Hinata and Shina's brawl over who got the bath, including a beatdown on Naruto and Haku for letting them fight without telling them it was open again. They had settled down with a small meal and conversed over the up-and-coming exams. "So Naruto, how long do you think it will take for you to find Lady Tsunade?" Haku had asked, still eating the chicken and rice they made. Thinking it over, he said, "It shouldn't take too long, at most a day if I look in the right spots. At the most a week. But what I'm more concerned over is the competition at the moment." Everyone looked at him questioningly, where he answered, "With Gaara and his team, that leaves us with the Genin team from the Leaf holding 5 teams totaling out to 15 people, the Auto Ninja, Kabuto's team, which if one of them leaves earlier withdraws, and the Kiri team, who are gonna hold a grudge against us or gun for you for having one of the 7 swords. And lastly Iwa, who are gonna gun for me since I look like my old man." He paused and said, "That being totaled is a total of 27 people, meaning there are either going to be several free slots given or are gonna be tag team matches, but again this is if some people don't forfeit due to coming into the preliminaries on the 5th day." They instantly agreed. With so many variables they had to plan accordingly, like if someone specializes in long range or close like the Auto Ninja. And they don't know how strong Kabuto is, really his team included. If they were going to deal with them they had to be careful. Shina said, "Well, from what we know it's basic to guess what they're capable of. Kiri are specialized in Kenjutsu, Suiten, Futon, Kaden and some Doden Jutsu. And a small few are skilled in Raiden. We are all skilled in several and have high stamina, so with several affinities. They nodded and Hinata said, "And we already know Otto who specialize in sound-based jutsu. If we identify and disable their means of using jutsu we have the advantage." With Iwa they specialized in Kaden, Doden, and several bloodlines like Kiri. Once more the others agreed and Naruto carried on. The only ones we have to truly worry over are Kabuto and Gaara. Kabuto from what I sensed had high Chunin reserves and control. And Gaara is a Jinchuriki like I once was, and has control over sand meaning he has absolute defense over long range and close range techniques. They nodded when they all finished yawning. He said, "Well, we will focus on them later. For now let's rest up and tomorrow we can start training. Just because we're stronger doesn't mean we can't improve on our weak points." They nodded. Getting into the beds, Naruto, Shina and Hinata were in one bed, while Haku was in the other. 4-day summary. During the last 4 days Team 8 has been practicing for the preliminaries, with a few difficulties. Once Team 7 had woken up they instantly began harassing them, Kiba flirting with Hinata, Sasuke demanding they hand over their stuff and the like. Though Orochimaru had stopped listening to Kiba and has been spending time with them since the events in the forest, and the building frustration and loathing Orochimaru has for Kiba's constant boasting and claiming he's been doing everything on his own, not giving Orochimaru the respect he deserves. Kakashi has been no better. He's been caught spying on them with his Sharingan to copy the jutsu they used to give to Sasuke, but to his frustration he couldn't copy them. And during the break Naruto and his team have been relaxing with the other Leaf Genin except for Anko's team who Naruto's bumped into on several occasions, though neither of the three have spoken except for a brief, "Pardon me," though something about them seems to be familiar to him. He's told the other Genin teams about the upcoming events besides Team 7 thinking Kakashi's told them, but he was quiet unsure though Team 9's Genin Neji has been rather hostile towards Hinata though he already knows why. Though Ino seems to be acting quiet different than usual during the time they've seen each other she hasn't spoken about anything Sasuke related for the 5-day break. When asked she said how Sasuke had absolutely insulted her and berated her pissing off the other Genin teams about his harsh words. And had begun training with the others to become a better kunoichi with the use of the gravity and resistance seals and his patented Sharingan proof seal. Increased her repertoire in ninjutsu and skills in taijutsu and genjutsu. In the arena of the Tower of Death, no actual name so made one up. At last the 5 days had come to an end and the various teams had made it to the arena. Kabuto's team looked banged up, the teams from Iwa and Kiri looked like they've just arrived just like Kabuto's team. And the Auto Genin came in with Zaku's arm being bound in a sling showing he had been in an accident not too recently. As the last of the teams reached the arena they all came to see the various Chunin sensei and the village's Hokage standing above the arena on the stands. Everything went silent as the Hokage delivered a speech about the purpose of the exams and wars between the villages. The Chunin on the floor cut him off when he said, "If you don't mind Hokage-sama, but I would like to carry on with the events and get to the rules." I didn't feel like giving him the cough. You all know how he sounds so just imagine it. He nodded allowing him to proceed with the exams. "Now my name is Hayate Gecko and will be the proctor of the preliminary exams." Tamari cut in asking, "Preliminary exams? Isn't there just the finals?" Getting other Genin to agree with her but was quickly silenced when he said, "That is how it works normally but due to the number of Genin to pass the second exams we decided to hold a preliminary match thus letting us cut the people attending to the finals by a margin." They agreeing seeing he logic with that letting him continue. "Now as you see above you is a monitor to announce the matches of the preliminary fights. Once the fight starts if there is outside interference on either side it is considered an instant forfeit for that Genin. Before anyone asks killing is allowed but it is preferred not to be done. And lastly when a match is called and you continue to attack your opponent you will be disqualified. Does everybody understand?" They said yes when he carried on and said, "Now before the first round starts is there anyone who would like to forfeit now?" Nobody raised their hands for a few seconds till Kabuto did saying, "I would like to I don't have enough chakra to continue." He was about to leave when Naruto cut him off saying, That's too bad Kabuto-chan I was looking forward to seeing where you stood but seeing as this is your 7th time attempt I guess you just don't have the talent to advance there's no shame in forfeiting though." That pissed him off causing him to change his mind saying, "Never mind Hayate-san I think I will continue I have a few chakra pellets to use." Naruto chuckled mentally thinking, hook, line, and sinker. getting an exasperated sigh from the others with Haku saying, "Of course. Only you would do that, Naruto." Shina and Hinata giggled thinking, it worked, didn't it? After all, now whoever has to fight him has to knock him out and let someone take him to Anbu. He nodded, but still paying attention as their focus was drawn back to Hayate, who said, "Now due to the number of people here, one or more people will have to fight more than once. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer?" Naruto waved his hand around like a child on a sugar high saying, "Oh. Oh right, hear me." Kurenai, Tsunade, Sarutobi and Anko laughed at his antics, while Anko held no restraint, cackling like a crazed hyena. Turning their attention towards the big monitor, the names began to flash through the genin in the room till it stopped at Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kabuto Yakushi. Hayate said, "Will everyone besides Kabuto Yakushi and Naruto Uzumaki go up towards the bleachers to start the first round of the preliminary matches?" He nodded, but still paying attention as their focus was drawn back to Hayate, who said, "Now due to the number of people here, one or more people will have to fight more than once. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer?" Naruto waved his hand around like a child on a sugar high saying, "Oh. Oh right, hear me." Kurenai, Tsunade, Sarutobi and Anko laughed at his antics, while Anko held no restraint, cackling like a crazed hyena. Turning their attention towards the big monitor, the names began to flash through the genin in the room till it stopped at Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kabuto Yakushi. Hayate said, "Will everyone besides Kabuto Yakushi and Naruto Uzumaki go up towards the bleachers to start the first round of the preliminary matches?" As everyone walked up the steps, Sasuke and Kiba were making snide remarks about how he was gonna lose, making the Chunin look at Kakashi to rein in his students, but just stared at the fight that was about to begin when he and his two students get blasted by the killer intent from aimed at them from Anko's team, making them stop. Naruto stared at his opponent standing across from him as he took a chakra pellet out and said, "You can give up now, you know there's no shame in doing so?" Naruto grinned and said, "Says the man who has yet to advance to Chunin after 7 attempts and was about to give up on this attempt, making 8 now? And there is also the fact that you smell like snakes, blood, and medicine. I wonder who you really are. I know Anko-chan hasn't taken apprentice and there are only 2 summoners for that clan. And let's not ignore the fact that you had information about ninja from several villages and their mission records and history." The more he listed, the more nervous he grew as the Chunin in the room began to focus on him in suspicion as he placed the last few clinches. "And their fact that the information you gave should only be given to the Chunin and the cage of the village, both of which you are neither. And the last key fact of your headband having a genjutsu over it." That got everyone's attention as he tried to recover. What genjutsu? Surely you're kidding." He grinned saying, "Your heartbeat is pounding pretty heavily right now, isn't it? You know they say that when a person's pulse increases is when they're lying, right? And you're sweating," with a slight stutter. "Oh. Someone isn't being truthful now, are they? Bad Kabuto-chan." He turned to Hayate and said, "Let's start the match, I'm in the mood to kick someone's ass." He nodded and said, "The first match of the Chunin preliminary round will now start. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kabuto Yakushi, begin." Play breaking. Benjamin had enough. Jumping to the stands, Naruto reached for a seal on his arm, revealing the same butcher knife-like sword from before, and said with an unnerving fox-like grin, "Come on, entertain me. The last fight I had in the forest didn't hold up to my standards." Kabuto popped the pill in his mouth as he coded his chakra into his hands, running towards Naruto, attempting to get a hit on his shoulder, only to hit nothing and get a gash on his shoulder which promptly healed. Naruto said, standing behind him, "So it seems you have some form of bloodline letting you heal quicker. Nice to know. That means you aren't as fragile as glass. This is gonna be fun." Getting into a stance, he charged at Naruto again, only to get a slash across the back, making him grunt as Naruto swung his sword. Cutting off the circulation of chakra to his hands, he formed several hand signs and said, "Fire style, fireball jutsu," spitting out a large ball of fire only for it to be cut in half as Naruto said, "Wind style, cleaving gale," with a blade of wind charging at Kabuto, who promptly got out of the way as a large slash was formed in the wall where he once stood. Disappearing, Kabuto looked around only to get launched into the air from a kick to the jaw when 2 Narutos appeared near him. In the stands, everyone in the stands were staring at the fight with a slack jaw expression besides Shikamori, the cage and several Chunin. Anko turned to the 3 cloaked figures and said, "So does he hold up to your expectations so far?" They nodded, seeing Team 8 when the shortest figure tapped her and pointed in their direction. She said, "Oh, Kur-chan, it's good to see ya. Who are the two new people?" Tsunami said, "I'm Tsunami Yuki and this is Haku Yuki. Naruto-kun brought us with him to the village and we were added to Team 8 along with Naruto when he switched with Kiba-san." She nodded after giving her a handshake and said, "I forgot when he started training he took to everything he did like a fish to water. He could have became a Chunin by now if he asked." Kurenai said, "Come on now Ko-chan, you know how he is. Though with how Kakashi has been on his case he may ask to be a Chunin after the exams are over." Hinata, who's been staring at the three figures feeling something familiar about them, was about to ask something when Haku cut her off saying, "Look." They turned to see Naruto grab Kabuto's arm and toss him into the statue while Kakashi and Sasuke had their Sharingan active, hoping to copy the jutsu he's used. Back to the fight. Yawning out of boredom he said, "Come on now Kabuto, surely you're not this weak. But with how you have yet to reach Chunin I know I shouldn't have my hopes up." Kabuto growled and said, "Alright, the kid gloves come off brat." He charged only to slam into the ground from an intense pressure that made the air vibrate. He said, "Now no need for such harsh words, but I'm gonna finish this quickly." The pressure intensified and flared till it was visible around him in the form of a blackish-red flame that formed around him, causing the air to quake. Extending his hand he said, "Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. Bakudo number 61, Rikujikoro, way of binding number 61, 6 paths binding light." As everyone stared intently at the scene before him, Kakashi and Team 7 laughed at him for acting stupid when, to everyone's surprise, 6 rods of blades appeared around Kabuto, circling around him before the blades slammed into his midsection. He said as Kabuto tried to move, finding himself incapable, "There's point in struggling, the technique I used makes impossible for you to move. That's one of the hundreds of techniques I've created. Bakudo number 61 or way of binding number 61 Rikujikoro. Stop song." Appearing behind him he chopped him in the back of the neck, rendering him unconscious as he looked at Hayate and said, "You can call the match now, he can't move for some time now." He nodded and said, "Winner of the first preliminary round goes to Naruto Uzumaki." The crowd above cheered while Team 7 remained silent as he walked up the stairs, watching the screen as Kabuto was carted off by the medics. When he snapped his fingers the blades shattered, leaving no trace. Kakashi stood in his way saying, "What was that technique, Genin?" Giving him a blank look he said, "It's one of the series of techniques I've been working on and tested out." Problem? He said with a tone of authority. He said, "How did you do that?" Grinning, Naruto said, "What's the matter, you and the Uchiha fledgling couldn't copy it with your pathetic Sharingan? I'm not telling you shit, Hitaki, get used to it." Walking to his team he felt Kakashi reach for him to yank him back when Naruto's foot was a short distance away from his face as Naruto said, "Don't push your luck, Hitaki. The only difference between us is our rank. That can be changed if I ask to be promoted now due to my track record. So I suggest you retract your hand if you intend to keep it." Turning to his group he walked away, ignoring the glare. He said, eyeing the 3 figures, "Hey Enko-chan, how have you been? And who are these 3? She grinned and said, Naru-kun, that would be telling, you'll find out soon. But I can give a hint to you, Hinata and these 3 know each other." Quirking an eyebrow he said, "We know each other. Were they born in this country?" She shook her head saying, "2 more guesses." Hinata said, "Are they from a nation we're allied with?" She nodded, her grin growing, and said, "Last guess." He and Hinata said, "Are they from Kumo? Are they from Suna?" She grinned and said, "Yes, they're from Kumo, Naruto-kun, but you have to guess their names." The 2 ninja looked at the 3, feeling their gazes on them as well as they felt a familiar air about them when he walked up to the tallest and said, "You have a proverbial tick of Dagazaru tilde." She giggled and said, "Good job, Naruto koi Dagazaru tilde." Hinata walked up to the short one who was parallel to her chest and said, "You don't speak, but people who know you can tell what you're saying by looking in your eyes." She nodded as Naruto and Hinata stood in front of the second tallest as Naruto felt her gaze stoically at him when he said, "And if you're paid you will do take a job." The last figure nodded as Naruto pointed out, Zazie, Kaide, and Mana, getting nods from all 3 of them, making him smile when they heard Hayate say, "For the second round of the preliminary matches will Subaku no Kankuro and Masumi Tsurugi. Subaku no Kankuro vs. Masumi Tsurugi. Same as canon except with a few, and the Iwa and Kiri teams were defeated except for Kuritsuchi who got a pass. Kiri's team were defeated by Anko's team, and Kuritsuchi fought one of her teammates while Haku beat the other due to being paired that way. Winner Subaku no Kankuro, Hayate shouted as Kabuto's teammate was carried off by the medics. The other matches went on the same except Ino who won and Sasuke won due to him using a move he stole from Lee during their fight. Naruto and the others watched as Lee lost his match against Gaara, making him growl as his leg and arm were crushed horribly, making him think, note to self-check scrolls on medical jutsu to see if I can't make a new jutsu to restore his arm and leg. Watching the screen again they called, will Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Yuhi, Kiba Inuzuka, and Neji Hyuga come down to the arena floor. Naruto and Hinata hopped down from the railing after they were wished good luck from the others, while Neji and Kiba walked down the stairs with arrogance about them. Hayate said, this will be a team match, Naruto and Hinata versus Neji and Kiba. The match is over when one team is left standing. The four got in a stance as Naruto stood with his hands were clawed and in a similar stance as the Jukin, but his legs were slightly further apart. Hinata was in the standard Jukin stance except she looked more loose and appeared to be swaying. Kiba said, might as well give up, loser. As soon as this is over I'm gonna show you who's top dog around here as I claim my bitch. Adding fuel to the fire, Neji said, you might as well, a clanless Dobi is destined to lose against a Hyuga and have her shown her place. They looked at the Hokage silently asking him, which he nodded to, making them build up their chakra in a burst, filling the arena in a gust of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood at a solid 5'10". He wore a black bandage around his eyes as his hair turned red with blonde ends. He wore black Anbu-styled pants with a black and gray rope-like belt with tags hanging from them, and a red high-collared zip-up shirt as the right arm was wrapped up to his shoulder in medical bandages. On his back was a large butcher knife, while he had a chikudo on his right side and a set of katana on his left side. His hair went down to his calves, being held together in a braid with a blade attached to the end of his hair. On his hip was a black fox mask with bright red markings. They looked at Hayate as Hinata said in a cold, emotionless tone as she drew her swords, can we start now? A certain mud is begging to get his ass beat and I'm gonna be the one to do so. He nodded, giving Kiba a pitying glance, and said, the last match of the preliminary round will now commence. Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Yuhi versus Kiba Inuzuka and Neji Hyuga. Naruto turned to Hinata and said, so you want to tear the mud apart? She nodded with a grin that resembled Anko to well, making him sigh and say, and I get to deal with you, asshole of a former cousin Joy. His voice dripping with sarcasm. In the stands, Kakashi's eyes went wide and said, what the hell is that? Kurenai said, that's how Hinata and Naruto always looked. They've taken their training seriously and grew to be as strong as the other. I also meant to say this, great job pushing away your strongest genin, by the way. Anko nodded and said, I agree with her on this. You had a strong genin and you could have been known as the man who had the only shinobi to master every form of jutsu there were. Turning to the Hokage he said, she's serious? He was the dead last of the academy. Frowning he said, and you don't remember what he did during the wave mission? Since Naruto was a little boy he and Hinata have been training together. They've been training since before they were in the academy. Some of the Chunin here were their teachers. Looking around they nodded, making him scoff, saying, they're probably not as strong as Sasuke still. They all ignored him as they watched the fight start. On the arena, play Bullet's theme from BlazBlue Chrono Phantasms. He said, alright, let's do this. The sooner we finish this, the sooner I can get to rest before the finals. She nodded and charged Kiba, giving him a kick to the stomach, sending him crashing into the wall with a lot of force before assuming the Jukin stance again, watching Naruto's fight with her former cousin as he danced around him, furthering his aggravation. Naruto said, you know, if this is all the Hyuga have to boast about is some brat with a subpar taijutsu style, then I don't see how they're able to boast about being the greatest clan in the village. Growling he shouted out, what do you know, name orphan? The Hyuga are the strongest clan in the Leaf Village. He grinned as he charged at Neji with 3 quick jabs to the shoulder, knocking out the tenketsu there. He said, if that's so, how come you have yet to beat this orphan? While I've closed your tenketsu in your arm, effectively shutting down your taijutsu style. Growling, he charged at him with his good arm only for Naruto to grab it and flipped him over himself and in mid-fall kicked him into the wall. He yawned as he saw Hinata already having beaten Kiba as he laid against the wall rest on top of the statue watching him fight. Jumping, he dodged Neji's attack to his back only for him to spin, kicking Neji in the side of the head, making his head whip around and fall flat on his face. He grunted as Naruto said, "I heard about your comment about Lee and your teammate 10-10 deserving what had happened to them because they're failures." He nodded only to get another kick to the head, making him roll across the ground. He said, "It's funny that two failures are kicking your ass, Mr. Prodigy. It makes me wonder if the Hyuga are as strong as they claim or if they're posturizing their non-existent skills like the Uchiha." He growled, running before he slid into a stance, saying, "You're within my field of divination 8 trigrams 64 palms." As he did, Naruto continued to dodge every blow he made when Naruto said, assuming the same stance as his hands sparked with black electricity, "No Hyuga, you're within my field of divination 8 trigrams 64 thundering palms." 2 palms, hitting the arms. 4 palms, hitting his chest. 8 palms, the lower stomach. 16 palms, the arms again. 32 palms, he spun around hitting his back. 64 palms, hitting every tenketsu. As he finished, his hands continued to spark with black electricity as he shook till he fell to his back unconscious. End song. He looked over at the two unconscious fighters as Naruto said, "You gonna call the match, Hayate-san? Those two are out like a light." He nodded as he shouted out, "The winner of the final match of the preliminary round is Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Yuhi." The people in the stands cheered as he said, "I would like for everyone to come down to the arena floor for an announcement." Filling down the stairs, he waited till they gathered and announced, "Now that the number of fighters for the finals have decreased, we can draw slots for the rounds." Pointing towards the lot box Anko was holding, he said, "Once you draw your number you will announce it and then the people fighting will be." Once everyone drew their number, they each announced. 1, Naruto said with a grin. 2, Zazie showed her ball to say. 3, de Gazaru tilde, Kaide said. 4, Mana said looking over at Kaide with a grin, who grinned back. 5, Sasuke said with a smirk. 6, Gaara said. 7, Kuritsuchi said. 8, Hiku said with a small smile looking out of the corner of his eye. 9, Kamkuro said. 10, Shina said. 11, Shikamori drawled out with a slight undertone of uninterest. 12, Tamari said. 13, Hinata said. 14, Dosu said, leering at Hinata until she hit him with a dose of killer intent, making him stop. The Hokage said, looking at everyone, "Now that the pairings have been made, you will have 1 month to prepare." This being said because everyone knows what you can do. This gives you the chance to master what you know and learn new tricks to keep your opponent guessing. They all nodded as the genin and their senseis walked out of the room as he and Hinata were approached by their surrogate grandfather, saying, "You both know the drill. You can rest for today, but tomorrow you and whoever you trust to accompany you will leave to get her. Remember, you have a month exactly to get her. She should just be entering Tanzaku Gai by the first week." They nodded and were about to leave when they were stopped by him again, tossing them 2 scrolls, saying, "And congratulations, Elite Junin Naruto Namikaze and Hinata Yuhi Namikaze." Raising an eyebrow, he said, "Not that we don't appreciate this, but why are we being promoted? Especially so soon?" He chuckled and said, "You two were given so many recommendations by the other Junin that I would be a fool not to. And with your reminder of your records, I dare you both to tell me you aren't above Sanin in rank?" Opening their mouths, unable to say anything, they just nodded as they said, "Thank you, Hokage-sama, we'll do you proud." Smiling, he patted them both on the shoulder, saying, "No need to thank me. I've seen you both train and come far, from the lonely little boy screaming about becoming Hokage and a shy little girl dreaming of showing her family wrong. I'm proud of you. Who knows, keep it up and you might beat your old man at being the youngest Kage to be in office." Naruto took his old grin and said, "Just you watch, old man, I'll be wearing that hat before you know it." Giving a good-natured laugh, he said, "I don't doubt that, my boy. I don't doubt that. And I know your parents would be proud if they could see you both now so young and to be so strong." He gave them a quick wave before vanishing in a shunshin as the two of them vanished in a flash, landing outside their home in the Namikaze family estate. "So Hinaheim, should we leave now or rest then leave first thing in the morning?" he said while walking through the doors of estate only to get tackled by familiar trench coat wearing woman kissing him fiercely making him chuckle saying, "Man hubby Heim didn't even step one whole foot into the door." Chuckling she said licking his ear, "Oh but I missed my foxy coon but what's this I hear about a mission?" Hinata said as she sat on the couch next to the everyone saying, "Hokage-sama gave us a mission to get Tsunade-sama during the month-long break of the Chunin exams. We were given the mission along with a promotion to elite Junin due to getting so many requests from other Junin." Chuckling she said, "Yay me and Kur-chan were one of the people who requested it seeing as we've seen you two take S-rank missions Anbu would even fail it and succeed with zero effort or injuries for that matter." They grinned saying, "Hey we had excellent teachers. But back to the mission are any of you available?" They all shook their heads with Kurenai and Tsunami saying, "We're gonna train Shina and Haku for the finals." He nodded as Anko said, "And I'm training my cute little genin in the chamber as well to prepare them. We're taking the month and turning it into a year in there." He sighed and said, "Alright this gives me the chance to try out a new jutsu I've been meaning to test out." They raised an eyebrow at that even Hinata who asked, "What technique are you working on? I mean you have tons of jutsu in the experimental stage as is. And what was the massed burst of chakra I felt before the Chunin exams?" Grinning he said, "That was the new defense system for the village being placed back then." She raised an eyebrow and said, "Alright now when do we go?" "The sooner we get her the better." He sighed and said, "I would like to rest for the afternoon and we can leave later tonight." They nodded and spent the afternoon preparing their supplies and relaxing with everyone and catching up with the girls talking to the others. With Hiruzen, "You wanted to see me old friend?" Danzo said as he limped into his office when the aged Cage looked up from his desk. He said, "You are aware of the situation aren't you? With Orochimaru and the invading forces?" He nodded saying, "Yes but what does this have to do with calling for me?" He sighed saying, "I know you still have your root running around and that's what I want to bring up. With Naruto's seals defending the gate we still have the inside and outside forces. That's where your root come in. But first how many are in your forces?" Thinking it over for a moment he said, "Over 2-0 root ninja why?" Taking a puff from his pipe he said, "I want to make the root an official branch of the Anbu again. You and I will hold joint control, and during this month I want them to have their emotions to be returned to them. Once that's done they're going to be scouting the inside and outside during the month to find if any forces are in hiding. And while the finals are going there to take out the forces on the outside while not raising suspicion to the enemy can you do that?" Caught off guard he said, "Well that is something I wasn't expecting? Why the change of heart before you wanted them disbanded?" Taking another drag he said, "You can thank young Naruto for that," he said. "We're going to need as much help as possible and that won't happen if we're at one another's throats with Kunai. Plus he and young Hinata see you as family as much as me which is why he gave me this." Taking a small pill bottle from his desk he tossed it to him saying, "And that is a special pill that will have you pretty surprised." Not taking his eyes from the pill he said, "They will be ready before the month are over now if you'll excuse me I must have my forces go through to conditioning." Watching his friend walk out the door he said smoking his pipe as he looked out the window, "Naruto-kun you're gonna make things a lot more different around here." At the front of the village near midnight, Naruto and Hinata stood before the gate of the village with their supplies packed saying their goodbyes as Naruto and Hinata hugged them all. Hinata said, "We will see you guys soon alright and make sure you all put your all into your training okay?" They nodded giving Hinata one more hug as Haku turned to Naruto who was given a fierce kiss by Kurenai, Tsunami, Anko and the girls leaving him breathless. The two just stared at each other only giving a subtle nod to the other with a man hug to follow up as they dashed out of the gate fading into the darkness before them. With Naruto and Hinata, "So Naruto-koi how long will it take to reach Tanzaku?" she said as she tree jumped alongside him who looked in her direction and said, "If we keep going at our rate of speed we should reach the town in the matter of 4 hours, sooner if we use my shunpo." She said, "Why don't we use that then?" He shrugged and said, "You never asked." Looking at him with an emotionless face she whacked him over the head saying, "Baka? We could have been gotten to the town." He chuckled as he wrapped his arms around her making her blush loving the feeling of his strong arms around her waist as they vanished in a burst of static. In front of Tanzaku Guy, unwrapping his arms from around her waist she groaned saying, "I love that feeling." Looking at her she specified with a pout, "Feeling your arms around me." Laughing, he took her hand in his as they walked through the gambling town and said, "Well, as soon as we get to an inn we can sleep with you in my arms the entire time. Who knows, the clan funds are a little low. And this is a gambling town after all. Who says we can't have a little fun while on our search?" Giggling into her free hand, she kissed him on the cheek, saying, "Sure, Naruto-kun, but let's find a place to sleep, I'm exhausted." He nodded as they traversed the town to come to a nice hotel where they got a pretty nice room, large single bed, with a TV, couch, and a refrigerator with sake and other beverages. And a large bathroom with a large walk-in shower and bath. Kissing his neck as she draped her leg over his, she said, pressing herself further into him, "Night, Naru-koi." Next morning, "More Naru-koi, don't stop," she mumbled, pressing herself into a shadow clone, making him chuckle as he cooked breakfast as the kitchen was in the same room as the bedroom. The clone dispelled as he walked towards her on the bed as he whispered into her ear, "If you wake up I'll do whatever you want." Her eyes shot open, making her freak out, causing him to chuckle as she slapped him on the arm. She pouted, saying, "Naru-koi, that wasn't nice, I was having a wonderful dream." He chuckled, saying, "I know, I heard you. But I'll make you a deal, we find Tsunade Daibo and her assistant Shizune and we can do whatever you want tonight." Her fork in her mouth eating, she nodded as she shoveled another forkful of food. She said, "What is the other reason for wanting her to return to the village other than having more properly trained medics and you godmother in the village?" Freezing, he said, "Am I that transparent?" She shook her head, saying, "No, I've just known you for that long, love. But seriously, what is the other reason?" Sighing, he took out a scroll from his pants pocket, saying, "Apparently my mom and her made a deal on Tsunade's behalf that I be her husband." That made her go wide-eyed, making him chuckle, saying, "Yeah, threw me for a loop too. But apparently it was something she truly desired, was for her and I to be married. Why, I don't know, but I want to find out." Putting her plate to the side, she said, "Do you want to go through with this?" He sighed, scratching his head, saying, "That's the thing, I don't mind going through with this, but I want to know if you're okay with this." Being silent for a moment, she said, "I knew that with you being the last of your family you're needed to marry multiple women, I know that. But the mystery is Tsunade wanting to marry you. If she still wants to after so long, fine, but I want to know the exact reason why she wanted to in the first place." He nodded as their thoughts led back to the same question of why she wanted this in the first place when he got up, saying, "Well, our questions won't be answered till we find her, so let's go." She nodded, getting out of bed and running to the bathroom, watching as her hips swayed in her small shorts with a lustful grin and a low growl, appreciating her figure. Sitting by the door, she was dressed in a set of clothes similar from the preliminary battle, saying, "Come on, Naruto, let's find her and get this over with. The old man needs us to be back before the end of the month, remember?" He nodded and said, "How are we gonna search for her? Split up or have our shadow clones work in groups with us searching from a higher point?" She thought it over, saying, "Let's take the second option, this way we can narrow our searches down to a more manageable level." He nodded as the two of them creating several shadow clones and split them up into teams of two. He said, looking at her, and said, "Shall we, love?" She nodded, following him to the top of the castle in Tanzaku-gai, using their dujutsu to scout as this went on for a half hour when Hinata tapped him on his shoulder, pointing to the southeast where the other entrance was seen. A buxom blonde and a petite brunette with a pig in her arms walk into a bar. Looking to his side, he said, "Shall we go and meet my godmother?" She nodded, adding her opinion, "And let's not forget my possible harem sister." Lightly bopping her on the head, he said, "Extended family. You know I hate that term." She nodded, pouting playfully, saying, "I know, but let's move. I'm curious about why she insisted on this arranged marriage in the first place." Nodding, he placed her in a bridal carry as they jumped from the top of the castle, disappearing in an ethereal light. As they reappeared on the roof of the bar, they saw her walking in. In the bar. Walking in, they had to admit the bar was more upscale than they had expected, but had to remember this is a tourist gambling town. They gotta appeal to the masses, such as families and such. Looking around, he saw the tall blonde and her company sitting at a bar being hounded by men, and judging by the look on her face, she was close to destroying them and the bar. Acting fast, they made their way to the bar, hearing one man say, "Come on baby, let me buy you a drink and show you and your little friend a real man." He could hear the blonde growl, saying, "I said no, you little shit." Angered, he reared his hand back, about to strike her, saying, "What did you say, bitch?" Swinging his hand down to her face, Naruto caught his hand, saying, "The woman said no, if you were a real man you would respect her decision. If I were you I would take my friends and leave before you get hurt." Turning their attention towards him, the guy next to him tried to swing his sword only for Hinata to punch him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. She said, "I'd listen to him if I were you. He's being generous with not killing you as is since he deplores violence towards women, so you have to understand why he's restraining himself from snapping your friend's neck. I just gotta give him the go-ahead and your friend will lose his head." Looking at Naruto, who had an unsettling grin on his face as he looked at them through the cloth covering his eyes, they could tell he was gazing right through them with a predatory gaze. Buying her word, he grabbed his friends and ran out of the bar as everything went quiet till Naruto and Hinata began to cackle good-naturedly. Sighing, he and Hinata turned to the people resting at the table saying, "You don't mind if the two of us join you, do ma'am?" Shaking her head, she said, "Not at all. This is my thanks for getting rid of those bastards. Been pestering this since we walked in. My name's Tsunade and this is Shizune. The pig in her arms is lunch?" Naruto interrupted, making the pig squeal negatively, making him chuckle, patting it on the head saying, "It's a joke, little fella, don't worry." It gave a sigh of relief as Shizune spotted their headbands saying, "You're from the Leaf Village, aren't you?" Tsunade spotted the headbands and got defensive, making him sigh saying, "No need to be on the defensive, Su-chan, we're here for two reasons." Raising an eyebrow at him while feeling an old familiar sensation in her heart again, said, "And what would that be?" He took out the scroll saying, "Does the name Kushina have any meaning to you?" Seeing her tense, he elaborated saying, "The only reason I ask is because the old man found a scroll that was addressed to a Naruto Uzumaki about some arranged marriage between you and him." Sighing, she said, "Yes, I know her. She was like a daughter to me. After Shizune's uncle died, I had no more reason to remain in the village till I meet her. She became the child I never had and I loved her like my own." Hinata pressed on, she said, "But what does this have to do with this Naruto boy?" Growling, she snapped, "I was getting to that, don't interrupt me again. Now, as I was saying, you see, in the Senju family we find our true loves through a surge of chakra in our body going of when that person is near. When she told me she was pregnant, I placed my hand on her womb to feel the baby and it went off. Feeling the sensation, I asked her to set up an arranged marriage with him." Raising an eyebrow, he said, "So why did you leave? From what I can understand, that surge makes you an extremely loyal lover to him, so why are you here and not in the Leaf?" A tear ran down the side of her face, saying solemnly, "The Nine Tails happened. You see, when he was born, his mother was the Jinchuriki for the accursed thing. Her husband, the fourth, was making sure the seal was intact when it suddenly released, destroying the village. They knew they weren't going to survive through this, so they decided to ask me to take care of him should they not make it." Hinata was about to speak when Tsunade cut her off saying, "I agreed, and they used a seal called the Shiki Fuin, the Reaper Death Seal, to seal it inside of their newborn. I was going to go to the Hokage who had him in his care at the moment when Jiraiya came showing me his dead body. Not having any more reason to stay in the village, I left, never to step in again." Growling, he said, "I keep having more and more of a reason to kill that sniveling toad." Raising her eyebrow, Hinata said, "Tsunade-sama, this is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki." Wide-eyed, she exclaimed, "But I was shown a body. Even a sample of his blood to make sure." He said, "That's because the pathetic toad decided to go along with a prophecy to have me act as a pariah for the masses, hoping to make me into the child of prophecy. During this I would be ostracized, beaten, abused, neglected and alone, hoping to be a boy starving for attention and become a beacon for the nation to bring about peace." She continued for him saying, "And what better way than to have him grow without someone to raise him?" He nodded saying, "That's right, Su-chan, and trust me when I say I want to kill him as much as I want to kill the snake for ruining Anko-chan's life. But that can wait, I get to meet my fiancé if you're still willing to give this a shot?" Thinking it over, she nodded saying, "Sure, I can give it a shot. But what is the second reason for coming here?" The waitress came asking if they would like something as they made their orders. He said, "Well, a certain snake has decided to come to the village. He intends to destroy the village, and the old man, me and Hinata alone are above S rank if not SSS rank and can handle the invasion alone. But even with our skill we need medicinal aid for the village. Since the time when your medical skills were revered, they've dropped in skill." Speaking up, Shizune said, "How bad could they be?" Raising an eyebrow, he said, "It takes 4 nurses to remove a bloody band-aid. And don't get me started on the medical ninja 4 kids I've seen come in with scratches from training, and well, it's a nightmare, and let's leave it at that." They looked over at Hinata, who was nodding, saying, "It's true. Sure, Naruto-kun and I have trained in every shinobi art, but our skills in medical ninjutsu isn't as skilled as your own. He's more of the poisons and tampering, while I specialize in the healing. And the two of us alone have more skill than the doctors there in our little fingers than they do in their entire chakra circulatory system." She said, feeling a bit coming as she said, "As much as I want to come along what to be with my fiancé, what is the possibility of there being a but to this situation being slim to none?" Scratching the back of their heads, he said, "Well, the but to this is that the old man may need you to take the cage position and set the council to the way it was again." Rubbing her forehead, she took a bite of her meal when the same waitress came with their food, saying, "Okay, but why would me being Hokage have anything to do with the council?" Pausing, he said, "That's because of an old law your grand-uncle made when he was in office, that when a new cage is put in office she may make a new law or abolish a current one. With the civilian council involved in shinobi affairs, they not only sent the academy to shit, but have taken a large amount of the funds from the village to pay for their selfish wants instead of what it should be used for." Taking another bite, he said, "And that leads to why the old man wants you in office, so that you can separate the two councils. The civilians handle the civilian affairs and only get a say in shinobi matters when it comes to war. And to ensure that they don't use the money for things that are unnecessary." Skeptically, Tsunade asked hesitantly, "What do you mean by unnecessary? What could they possibly be doing?" Hinata began to list things off as she handed Tsunade a scroll comprised of the various deeds and laws, bills they made for the Hokage to sign off on, like bigger homes for civilians, siphoning off money for the village in general for personal use. Just to name a few on their ever-growing list. The more she read off the list, the denser the air around them got, especially when she read one excerpt containing, "All profits of the Senju clan and items are to be given to the civilian council. And the Senju compound is to be transformed into a home for the Haruno clan." Knowing what she had just read, Naruto had thought, why the hell they thought they could pull something like that and not face negative consequences is far beyond me. He placed his hand on top of hers and said, "Calm down, Su-chan, they haven't done a thing as of yet. The old man wouldn't allow it. But you see why he sent us besides the contract apparently. He needs you to take the Hokage mantle and either outright remove the civilian council and the elders excluding Danzo Oji, or instill the wrath of God into them." She nodded and said, "Fine, I was gonna come with you since I have a reason to stay in the village again. But now I want to teach them not to fuck with the Senju." Naruto and Hinata grinned as she said, "Great, Tsunade-chan. But we have a full month to return to the village, so why not enjoy ourselves for a little while? And you and Naruto-kun can get to know each other." Both blondes blushed when she asked, "Naruto-kun, if what's with the bandages around your eyes?" Tilting his head, he said, "Oh, it's my bloodline." Curiously, she and Shizune said together, "Bloodline?"
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.